Chapter 726. Liang Yifan smiled and didn't say anything else. His aura gradually turned solemn. The light around him quickly dimmed, and the air became moister. Everything was covered with a gloomy feeling. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew wildly in the field, as if it was coming from all directions, as if a rainstorm was about to come. Lu Qing couldn't help but feel irritated. He was dissatisfied with everything like a beast trapped in a cage. The sixth move of the water sect, Coming Storm. Coming Storm forebodes wind. This was a secret skill of the mind and aura. It could effectively interfere with the enemy's condition, just like how changes in the weather could affect the mood of an ordinary person. However, it wasn't just a simple application of aura. It could also slowly merge with the surroundings, creating an environment suitable for the water sect physical invulnerability experts. Lu Qing took a deep breath and secretly activated the forwarding formula, suppressing all his worries and impatience. Following which, he focused his thoughts and the water surface froze. His mind was like a crystal carved with 7 apertures that could breathe on its own, contracting and expanding slowly. Thump, thump, thump. He no longer felt emotional fluctuations and was no longer affected by the weather. The 5th move of the Ice Sect, Enemy Heart Freezing Move. This happened to be the nemesis of Coming Storm. Of course, nemesis was always relative. If Liang Yifan's mind was much stronger than Lu Cheng's, he could still shatter Lu Cheng's ice heart and make him restless. Unfortunately, in the realm of physical invulnerability, there was no one who could completely suppress Lu Cheng in this area. Even the living Buddha Shi Shan, who had the wisdom of many lifetimes, couldn't do it. As for the warrior sage who could do what others couldn't, Lu Cheng couldn't be sure since he had never fought him in his complete form. After all, his opponent was a mighty one who had 1 foot in the door of the forbidden. It was best not to measure him with common sense. Whoosh! The wind was chilly and humid. Around Liang Yifan, droplets of water condensed. Beside Lu Cheng, it was as if he had entered the southern sky of Huaqing. The air was humid, causing his skin to fall into a state of breathlessness. His clothes absorbed the moisture and gradually became heavier. Lu Cheng didn't care about this level of influence. However, he had to respond to the suppression of his aura. He couldn't be at a disadvantage right at the start of the battle and be passive. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The sound of the wind suddenly became shrill, cutting his face like a knife. The water around him either condensed into white frost or fluttering snow. As for the surface of his skin, water vapor filled the air and a thin mist rose. The body was like a furnace and the exterior was cold. The two coexisted perfectly. This was the cosmic universe style. The biting cold north wind blew towards Liang Yifan, disturbing the environment where the water film was about to form, causing ice crystals to form in the lake, where the droplets of liquid converged. But the closer it was to the opponent, the purer the flowing blue waves became. They rippled endlessly heavy and thick. At this time, the song, A Cut of the Plum Blossom, is very appropriate. A certain unknown commentator seemed to have expected this. He added a piece of background music, and the atmosphere that should have been intense and tense suddenly became sad and lingering. Holy sh*T, a masterpiece. If I don't help the old granny, I'll give it to you. You really know martial arts. Give me back the emotions I've been brewing. It's over. I can't watch this match directly. In the live broadcast studio of the TV station, guest commentator He Xiaowei watched the battle of momentum on the field and laughed. Liang Yifan is slightly stronger, but the ice sect is indeed very good at restraining the water sect in this aspect. It's hard to tell who's better. Indeed. The host nodded in agreement. Then he looked at his partner with bright eyes and asked ambiguously, "Who do you think will win today? TSK, which side is he helping? Or is he simply waiting to see what happens when my toxic healer gets rebounded?" Yi Xiaowei had been in this industry for many years. He could tell when others raised their butts. Smiling like the Maitreya Buddha, he answered, "It's possible." Then he changed the topic. Although Lu Cheng said in the interview that he wanted to stand on the final stage, I believe no one will laugh at him even if he is eliminated today. No one will slap him in the face because of this. In the previous few matches, he has proven his standards with victory after victory that exceeded our expectations. He has proven his identity as a superclass fighter. He has proven that those words are backed by confidence and not arrogance. In other words, you think Lu Cheng is likely to lose today? The host smiled and changed the topic back. What the F***ck? He Xiaowei cursed under his breath. He smiled and shook his head. That's not what I mean. I'm just analyzing the situation after each side loses. Even if Liang Yifan loses with his personality, he won't be affected psychologically. He will be able to make a comeback very soon. Everyone listen up. Liang Yifan will definitely get a title before he turns 42. If he doesn't, I'll tattoo the symbol you choose on my head for a year. Cough, to maintain popularity, I have to create a gimmick occasionally. The host was stunned. After a long while, he put his hands together and said, "Let's pray for Liang Yifan. Good luck to him." As they spoke, the battle between Lu Cheng and Liang Yifan reached its climax. Snowflakes swirled in the air and the sound of waves could be heard. At this moment, the referee held the umbrella in his left hand and waved his right hand down. Begin. Bam. Lu Cheng's qi and blood circulated, stimulating a secret part of his body. He took a step forward. As he took the step, light blue flames spewed from his back and soles, propelling him towards his opponent like a rocket. Jet counterattack and the simplified attainment formula. The combination of the two made him almost as fast as the speed of sound. Over the past day or so, he had rewatched the videos of his matches. He realized that from the second round of the Warrior Sage battle onwards, he had been the one on the receiving end of the attacks. He had not launched a single attack. It was as if he had formed a set pattern when facing a strong opponent. That was why he changed from his usual self and attacked fiercely in an attempt to catch Liang Yifan off guard. He didn't condense the 5 flames in advance to avoid affecting his speed. Just as the sound of air breaking entered Liang Yifan's ears, Lu Cheng was already closing in. His fist was already in position, relying purely on his terrifying kinetic energy to hurt his opponent. As they rubbed against each other at high speed, a layer of flames ignited and enveloped him. It happened in the blink of an eye. Bam! The waves in front of Liang Yifan were split apart by Lu Cheng's figure. They rolled to the sides like the ocean Moses had pointed to. The pressure came through the layers of water. Liang Yifan suddenly felt weightless and was swept away by the waves. It was a perfect match for Lu Cheng's approach. Bam! His fist penetrated the water but didn't hit his opponent's face. The distance between them was closing inch by inch, but the momentum was getting slower. In that instant, in Lu Cheng's eyes, Liang Yifan was like a sailboat at the end of the river. He was so far away, so untouchable. The fourth move of the water sect, the unique movement technique, lone sailboat distant shadow. In the blink of an eye, Lu Cheng's fist finally caught up with his opponent after a long chase. However, Liang Yifan had already raised his arm and blocked from the side. Bam! The two arms froze in midair amidst the violent vibrations of the waves. At that moment, Liang Yifan's knuckles cracked as he blocked his opponent's attack. His fingers opened abruptly and 5 terrifying streams of water shot towards his opponent's face. They were so fast that they looked like they could cut through steel plates, alloys, and the body of a physical invulnerability expert. This was the application of the 5th move of the water sect, raging wave striking the shore. It was also commonly known as high-pressure water knife. Once this move was used, it was almost impossible for the opponent to avoid it. However, its biggest problem was that once the distance was increased, its effectiveness would decrease rapidly. It was only suitable for some extreme situations in close combat and had a lot of limitations. The moment Liang Yifan's knuckles moved, Lu Cheng understood. The hidden fire force exploded, causing his fist to circle in a small arc and hit his opponent's wrist diagonally upwards. Bam! Liang Yifan's palm rose uncontrollably. 5 water knives shot into the air and turned into raindrops that sprinkled down. However, they failed to hit Lu Cheng. Almost at the same time, one of them borrowed strength and punched out again, launching a storm-like attack. The other controlled his body and attacked continuously, like a never-ending tide. Bam! 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 Lu Cheng and Liang Yifan fought fiercely, attacking each other. The wind screamed, the rain moved horizontally, and the ice and snow swirled chaotically. Bam! Bam! In less than a minute they had already exchanged countless blows. Lu Cheng gradually felt a little tired because the discomfort in his left shoulder was slowly accumulating. And most of this accumulation was due to Liang Yifan going around in circles, coming and going, always attacking this side. He was targeting Lu Cheng's weakness. He was trying to use dripping water to penetrate a stone. P.S. Just a reminder, I have to go for acupuncture tomorrow morning. Only at night. Chapter 727. Before the match, Lu Cheng was very sure that Liang Yifan was targeting the problem with his left shoulder. Since his injury couldn't be healed, if he didn't do so, it would be easy to give up but difficult to take advantage of, which would make people doubt the authenticity of the words superclass. Because of this, Lu Cheng had specially considered how to deal with this problem. He wasn't a deity like in the legends. It was impossible for him to completely heal his shoulder and eliminate the weakness. If Liang Yifan kept attacking the same spot, it was only a matter of time before he exposed his weakness and lost the match. This was the result that both sides agreed to. The only way was to set up a trap around this point. Before the real problem appeared, he would use a false appearance to bait his opponent and deal a heavy blow. He would either win the match directly or gain the upper hand completely. However, Liang Yifan was also an experienced mighty one. He would definitely be on guard against this. If Lu Qing exposed his weakness, it was very likely that all his efforts would be in vain. He might even allow his opponent to take advantage of the situation. Therefore, his plan was to resist with all his might and think of other ways to avoid it. After failing again and again, he would seize the fleeting opportunity to lure Liang Yifan into the trap just before the real crisis arrived. He would use this to confuse Liang Yifan and lower his opponent's vigilance to the greatest extent. A similar idea had already formed in Lu Cheng's mind. Without thinking, he pulled his left shoulder back and took advantage of the situation to swing his leg and kick towards his opponent's knee covered in purple flames. Liang Yifan's footwork didn't seem special, but it was smooth and natural. Facing Lu Cheng's kick, he was swept away effortlessly as if he was swept away by a rolling current. With a turn, he avoided the attack and circled to his opponent's left side. He shook his right arm and punched towards Lu Cheng's shoulder. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Lu Cheng attacked continuously in an attempt to force his opponent to retreat or mitigate his attacks aimed at his left shoulder. However, Liang Yifan was always able to dodge at the right time. He continued to attack continuously, fully demonstrating the characteristic of dripping water can penetrate stone. He had already mastered the 7th move of the water sect, Lake and Mirror Wisdom. It wasn't as good as enemy heart-freezing insight when it came to stabilizing one's emotions and reflecting one's surroundings. However, it was better in terms of on-the-spot judgment and accurate consideration. It lived up to its name of intelligence. Bang bang bang. Lu Cheng's left shoulder began to ache faintly as their fists and forearms collided. He put on a good show and jumped half a step, raised his right arm to block and punched out his left fist covered in frost. When it was blocked by Liang Yifan, he immediately used the force to pull himself back and jumped back. While he was still in the air, he suddenly moved horizontally and avoided the opponent's continuous counterattacks. Liang Yifan's back was as smooth as water, as if he had no bones. With a slight twist, he immediately turned and chased after Lu Cheng. However, as soon as Lu Cheng's toes touched the ground, the fire force exploded again, and he made another turn, drifting diagonally. Bang! In the state of willow catkins in the wind, he did not continue to use the last Flame Emperor to change direction. Instead, he raised his hands and pushed forward. Waves of light blue flames gushed out from his palms, increasing his speed. Like a phantom, he shook off his opponent and pulled apart the distance between them. Now that there was a gap, he immediately condensed a crimson fireball behind his back. It flew and bombarded the enemy like a cannonball, assuming a long-range combat posture. Liang Yifan released his dark blue force, absorbing the surrounding water droplets and turning them into a sparkling water splash, intercepting the fireball perfectly. Boom! The explosion was not loud and the light disappeared in a flash. The water vapor evaporated into white mist and filled the air. Then Lu Qing entered the routine of the 9 rotations of 5 flames. The cannonballs were shot out one after another, and 3 fireballs were hovering around him all the time. Some were bright purple, some were red, some were gold, some were light blue, some were white, and some were light purple, and some were white. Boom, boom, boom. The fireballs were all intercepted by the dark blue sparks, and were destroyed together. One turned into heat and the other turned into water vapor. With the help of the Lake and Mirrored Wisdom, Liang Yifan's defense was flawless. However, in front of the special human-shaped cannon, the frequency of firing could not keep up. He could only defend passively and could not counterattack. The current battle reminds me of a shooting game. An unknown commentator chuckled and then said with a broad idea, "If this continues, there will be more and more water vapor and the temperature will get higher and higher. Is this a live sauna? Don't tell me. After steaming for a while, you'll be drenched in sweat. Then you'll jump into a cold pool. You'll feel so comfortable in the end. Yes, it's time for Lu Qing to use his ice holy light." At this point he suddenly had an idea. He added, half puzzled and half guessing, "If he continues to change, he will be in a disadvantageous position. If this continues, Liang Yifan will be at a disadvantage. The steam in the arena will only get hotter and hotter, which means Lu Qing is using an enhanced version of Inferno. In such an environment, Lu Qing, who can enter and leave the volcano laboratory 7 times, will definitely be like a fish in water. But Liang Yifan will have to guard the surroundings, otherwise he will be cooked. He accepted the long-range combat without putting up a fight. He should have anticipated this problem. I'm afraid he has a backup plan. Boom, boom, boom. In the midst of Talker's commentary, the area between the two where Liang Yifan was shrouded in white mist. The airflow was boiling, as though a large pot was placed there. At this moment, Liang Yifan suddenly ignored the crimson ball that was roaring towards him. He didn't use force to connect with the water vapor. Instead, he put his hands in front of his chest, facing up and down. Then he suddenly did a Tai Chi spinning motion. Whoosh! All the water vapor in the surroundings was stirred up, forming a sea of white mist. At the core of this sea was Liang Yifan, the funnel-shaped vortex he had created. At this moment he seemed to have become the master of this sea of steam, the god of heaven and earth. Whoosh! Whoosh! Liang Yifan straightened his back and pounced towards his opponent. As he swung his palms, the sea of steam surged towards Lu Cheng like water in reverse. In the midst of the swirling clouds, there were scalding tides everywhere. Lu Cheng's crimson ball of fire disappeared silently the moment it entered, as though it was adding bricks and tiles to the enemy's strength. Liang Yifan disappeared along with it. What appeared was the steam, which once again had the weight of water. The accumulation of more than 100 million tons made one deeply feel the heaviness, making one's body and mind tremble. The ninth move of the water sect, polar fusion. Swamp of heaven and earth. This was Liang Yifan's unique version. He had deliberately held back so that Lu Cheng could help him complete his preparations. This move intersected the mind with reality. Whoosh! Lu Cheng lost sight of his opponent, leaving only the sea of white mist that engulfed the heavens and earth. It was as though he had encountered a tsunami. He understood that this was the result of Tai Chi's mind being affected. However, he didn't dare to immediately use force concentration and the complete 9 words formula. Because Liang Yifan was hiding in the mist, he didn't know when he would launch a surprise attack. He couldn't give Liang Yifan the opportunity to strike. With a change of mind, Lu Cheng lowered his waist, tightened his arms, clenched his fists and punched forward diagonally. Around him, the faint purple, light blue and blazing white flames flew out and merged into one. He wanted to use the might of the 3 flames to resist the tsunami and temporarily create a peaceful zone, forcing Liang Yifan to wait. The moment his opponent was waiting for was the moment he used the complete 9 words formula. This was called not fearing exhaustion and defending indiscriminately. Rumble. The sea of white mist couldn't drown out the dazzling light, nor could it swallow the deafening sound. The tumbling waves of air blasted them into the sky and scattered everywhere like a giant fountain. Once the punch was out, Lu Cheng immediately retracted his chi and blood. He balanced and formed his Dan in his lower abdomen, allowing the dazzling stars to form the 9 words formula. Confrontation. Army. Fighting. Swordsman. Wholeness. Formation. Deference. Forwarding. Attainment. He suddenly pushed out his palms. His vision suddenly became clear. The steam lost its weight and no longer felt like a tsunami. Liang Yifan circled to the front of the weakened explosion waves. His fist was surrounded by a deep and heavy blue color, mixed with the endless power to connect the sky and the earth, and shot out like lightning. Whoosh! Using the wind and waves, Lu Cheng floated backward at high speed. His mind quickly outlined a complex visualization and his body made corresponding changes. Bam! When Liang Yifan's fist was about to hit him, he finished his preparations. He raised his right arm, clenched his fist, and struck out with the darkness in his palm. Specks of hidden brilliance were destroyed. Tilting northwest, sinking southeast. Boom. The wind and waves stopped and the steam solidified. Other than the headache-inducing sound that drilled into one's mind, everything seemed to have been destroyed and ceased to exist. After a brief moment of darkness, the audience saw that the white mist and waves were gone. Only a wide hole had appeared in the arena, as though a small lake had appeared out of thin air. Lu Cheng and Liang Yifan each took a few steps back, but the latter was like a rolling stream of water. He quickly brushed past his opponent at the edge of the lake, and launched a close-range attack, his punches never leaving the left. Bam bam bam. Lu Cheng blocked a few consecutive blows, but the fire force couldn't be maintained and he couldn't shake it off. The pain in his left shoulder seemed to be intensifying, and there were signs of discomfort. Bam. There was a slight delay in the movement of pulling his left shoulder and raising his arm. His strenuous support and difficult maintenance seemed to have finally come to an end. P.S. Correction of the mistake in the previous chapter. Coming rain should be the sixth move of the water sect. I didn't specify the moves in the document, and they were all listed in order. But a few days ago in a daze I counted the Xuanwu true sword of the Xuanwu sect. So the sixth move became the seventh. Chapter 728. Most of the audience wouldn't have noticed such a small delay. But to a physical invulnerability mighty one, it was obvious and clear. Liang Yifan took half a step forward and clenched his right hand into a fist. Before Lu Cheng could raise his arm, he punched towards his left shoulder. This simple move exposed his opponent's problem and made many people gasp. In the face of this, Lu Cheng seemed to be unable to dodge or even react hastily. However, at the position corresponding to his shoulder, Emperor Yen Force and Ice Spirit Force suddenly became active and collided. It was just like the encounter between a blazing white star and an icy darkness in his mind. A simplified physical invulnerability move, a mutated version of severe warning. The reason why Lu Cheng used it now was to block Liang Yifan's punches. His left shoulder was injured again in exchange for a chance to take down his opponent. Knowing that his left shoulder was the target of his opponent, how could he not be prepared? The previous dodging and defense were all to lower his opponent's vigilance. Ice and fire intertwined and yin and yang reversed. Lu Cheng's left shoulder suddenly became dark, like a bottomless whirlpool or a demonic beast hiding in the darkness waiting for its prey to approach. Once it absorbed the opponent's attack, it would immediately devour the opponent's strength and burst out. At this moment, Liang Yifan's finger joints suddenly moved. He opened his fist and a dark blue ball flew out from his palm. Poof! This dark blue ball hit Lu Cheng's shoulder and disappeared instantly, as if absorbed by a certain spot. Following which, his left shoulder caved in and his strength surged. The dark blue ball that was dyed black spurted out and hit the spot where it came from. But Liang Yifan had already used the reverse push of the dark blue ball to forcefully bend his back, dragging his right arm and dodging to the side. Bam! He pulled his shoulder and swung his right palm down, landing it on Lu Cheng's shoulder right after the dark blue ball was released. Lake and mirror mirrored wisdom. He had seen so many highlights of Lu Cheng's previous battles and knew that his opponent was good at improvisation. Even if he didn't set a trap, he couldn't take it for granted that his opponent was at his wit's end. Therefore he went with the flow and pretended not to be on guard, but in reality he was hiding dangerous changes. You have a good plan, I have a ladder. I'll beat you at your own game. Bam! Liang Yifan bent the 5 fingers of his right hand and tightly gripped the enemy's shoulder. Then he pulled and tore, paralyzing the left side of the enemy's upper body. At the critical moment, Lu Cheng's body suddenly expanded. His muscles bulged and his veins turned into dragons. His shoulders rose up against Liang Yifan's fingers, making Liang Yifan's grip feel like it was going to fly away. In the blink of an eye, Lu Cheng used a simplified version of the fighting formula. There was no time for him to think. Bang! Liang Yifan's grappling technique didn't work. His eyes narrowed, his left arm shook, and his fist smashed towards his opponent's waist to disturb his opponent and complete the grappling. Crack! His left fist cracked open the layer of ice, but it was wrapped up by the frost on his palm. Lu Cheng's right hand had reached out at some point. He flicked his knuckles and grabbed Liang Yifan's left fist. Lu Cheng had always thought highly of his opponents, especially when his opponents were superclass experts, after many rounds of self-examination in the arena or life-or-death battles. Therefore his first trap was to numb Liang Yifan. Only by putting himself in a desperate situation could he truly win the other party's trust. I'll beat him at his own game. Seeing that Lu Cheng was about to capture his opponent, Liang Yifan's expression didn't change. His left shoulder suddenly went limp, and his entire arm lost its tension. Like a python that had its bone pulled out, his arm drooped down naturally, pulling his fist back. Water can penetrate stone when it's hard, but water can meander when it's soft. At this moment, Liang Yifan's gaze suddenly turned cold. Lu Cheng's grappling technique with his right palm was just a cover. His real counterattack was on his left shoulder. Specks of faint purple flames had been compressed and condensed. They were unusually heavy, causing Liang Yifan's 5 fingers to stick to his shoulder as he tried to retract them. Using the characteristics of Emperor Yen Force, Lu Cheng allowed them to maintain contact for a short period of time. Following which, the ice spirit force in his body rushed into Liang Yifan's body through his right hand as if it was free of charge. At this moment, Lu Cheng didn't have the time to use any unique skills. He just used the most primitive and pure method. Since his opponent was using water force, which could effectively extinguish Emperor Yen Force and reduce the damage, he created Ice Tide to freeze the flowing water. Ice Spirit Force rolled and swept wildly. Liang Yifan's right hand was quickly covered in white frost starting from his fingertips. He was frozen in place, causing the contact to last for a few more moments. His expression was solemn and his eyes were blue. His muscles, fascia, and force all trembled and continued to circulate. Lu Cheng's ice spirit force lost the feeling of white mist along the way. It seemed that no matter how much it surged, it couldn't affect Liang Yifan at all. The first move of the water sect, stone sinking into the sea. A unique defensive skill. Crack. Liang Yifan broke free from the stickiness and swung backwards. At this moment, Lu Qing didn't feel dejected or disappointed. He forcefully raised his left hand and pushed forward with his right palm. Flames gathered in front of him, and countless faint purple flames gushed out of his body, forming something like a vitality bomb. When the ice spirit force flowed outwards, Emperor Yen force naturally gathered under the balance. His traps were linked, but they weren't particularly elaborate. They purely relied on their own characteristics. The more elaborate the trap, the easier it was to be interrupted and lose its effect. Flames flashed in Liang Yifan's eyes. He immediately twisted his waist and shifted his center of gravity, intending to dodge to the side. He believed that when his opponent threw out the fireball, he would have already dodged it. At most, he would be hurt by the aftershocks. However, Lu Qing didn't let the fireball fly. Instead, he detonated the primordial chi bomb formed by Emperor Yen force when the distance between them was still less than 5 meters. Is he crazy? The guest commentator He Xiaowei blurted out. This kind of attack would engulf Lu Qing as well. Boom. A blazing white light enveloped Lu Qing and Liang Yifan in an instant. Flames and smoke rose into the air with a loud buzzing sound, like a mushroom. Amidst the violent tremors of the earth, 2 figures flew backwards. Liang Yifan's hair was messy, his face was charred, and his body was covered in wounds. It was a horrible sight. However, as the dark blue circulated, his breathing was steady and didn't decrease by much. On the other hand, the flames on Lu Cheng's body didn't hurt his skin. There were many lacerations and dents in front of his body, but it was much better than his opponent. When facing an explosion and a wave of fire at the same time, a mighty one who often suffered similar injuries and a fire control expert would definitely be at an advantage. Furthermore, while Lu Qing was suppressing Emperor Yen force, he had also caused Ice Spirit to lose its balance, and his body automatically formed a defense. These 2 advantages were the reason why he dared to trade injury for injury with Liang Yifan. A small injury for a major injury. For Liang Yifan, a major injury would trigger the hidden danger he encountered with Empress Luo Ning Zitong. It would make it difficult to suppress the weakness that came from the root. That was Lu Cheng's real goal. If not, he wouldn't have a chance of defeating his opponent, even if he had prepared a trap. Bam! Lu Cheng's figure leaped out, closing in on Liang Yifan amidst the wind and waves. He launched his punches and kicks, using brutal blizzard and fiery invasion to suppress his opponent. During this process, he didn't feel anxious because of the worsening injury on his left shoulder. Instead, he gave up on a few dangerous opportunities to fight. It was as though he wanted to engage in a patient battle to wear down his opponent and wait for his opponent to reach the end of his rope. For a physical invulnerability expert of the water sect, this was originally a rare situation. However, with the dark sky force not completely removed and the heavy injury, everything was possible. Especially when Lu Qing was known for his insane mental strength and stamina, and he had the wholeness formula to refresh his condition. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Lu Qing used his ice heart to reflect his surroundings. Relying on his terrifying control of his body, he turned his left arm into a weapon, mainly for defense, while his right fist and legs were the spearhead for attack. The wind and snow howled, the flames lit up, and the dark blue rippled. The 2 were in an intense and stalemate. Lu Qing is trying to fight a battle of attrition, He Xiaowei pointed out. The host pondered for a few seconds before agreeing. This is his area of strength. Coupled with Liang Yifan's hidden danger and current condition, it's not impossible. Bam! In the midst of their discussion, Lu Qing moved to the side and threw a punch at his opponent's neck. Under the light of the purple flames, Liang Yifan raised his left arm to block, while his right hand punched out in an attempt to counterattack. Based on Lu Cheng's intentions and the trend he had shown before, he would definitely dodge this time. He wouldn't blindly engage in a desperate hand-to-hand battle and focus on attrition. That was Liang Yifan's plan. Compared to before, he was gradually showing signs of weakness. Bam! His right fist hit empty air, creating a shockwave. However, Lu Qing only leaned to the side and didn't move his feet. His fist, which was about to be blocked by his opponent's left arm, changed direction with a muffled thud. It rose to the sky and blasted towards Liang Yifan's face. Liang Yifan was slightly shocked, but he didn't panic. He quickly bent his back and raised his left arm. The first change of direction would obviously lead to a second change of direction. This was something Liang Yifan had to be cautious about. Therefore, when he blocked with his left arm, his force seemed to shrink inward. He planned to use a crouching force concentration to dodge and prepare to counterattack at the same time. At this moment, Lu Qing suddenly retracted his fist. He didn't do the second and third changes of direction. He wanted to achieve Dan equilibrium first. In that miniature universe, the stars moved and formed the word fighting. Lu Qing had no intention of fighting a battle of attrition. His previous performance only made this deduction seem logical. Once again, Liang Yifan was fooled. Yes, his opponent would get weaker and weaker. On the other hand, his mental and physical strength were abnormal. With the wholeness formula, a battle of attrition seemed to be the best and most reasonable way. However, Liang Yifan definitely wouldn't resign himself to death. He would definitely think of a way to break out of this situation. When that happened, there would be too many variables. It would be hard to tell who would win. More importantly, Xinghai's Queen of Thought knew the 9 words formula. God knows if Liang Yifan knew it too. If he also knew the wholeness formula, things would be troublesome. Therefore, Lu Qing only had one goal. First, he would paralyze his opponent. Then he would find an opportunity to attack. Close combat, crazy attacks, and take advantage of his opponent's hidden weakness. Under such circumstances, he might not be able to catch his breath at any time. Bam! Lu Qing's body grew taller and larger. He was over 2 meters tall. Faint purple ice crystals loomed on his body like engraved patterns. Bam! He took a step forward and raised his arm. His fist was like a giant hammer as he smashed it at his opponent. Liang Yifan was dodged and couldn't take advantage of the opportunity to distance himself. He could only spurt out his Dan force and jump up from his crouching position. He raised his arms to block. Bam! Hit by pure strength, his body wobbled and his legs trembled. Even the stone sinking into the ocean didn't completely dissipate. Bam! Lu Qing withdrew and released. It was the fighting formula again. Bam bam. After 2 consecutive hits, Liang Yifan gave up his footing and flew backward. Lu Qing, with faint blue flames behind him, chased after him. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. He didn't stop attacking. His opponent was wobbling and retreating as he fought. But the water sect physical invulnerability experts were resilient. They showed signs of defeat a few times but recovered each time. Bam! Lu Qing's punch was blocked. His momentum started to fall from its peak. His body started to show sluggishness and weakness. Damn it! I didn't manage to take him down in one go and now I'm in trouble. As his thoughts raced, Lu Qing was about to turn around and defend passively. But this time he didn't see his opponent's counterattack. How could Liang Yifan let go of this opportunity? His weakness had completely broken out. With this thought, Lu Qing's qi and blood surged. He stimulated his body and used the simplified wholeness formula. He seized the opportunity and didn't give Liang Yifan a chance to use a similar secret technique. Lu Qing's momentum surged again. While his opponent was catching his breath, he attacked crazily again. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. He didn't try to dodge the punches and kicks. He only avoided the attacks on his vitals and tried to seize that fleeting opportunity. Bam. Finally, his cannon punch broke Liang Yifan's stance. He lowered his shoulder and knocked his opponent away. Then he grabbed his opponent and threw him to the ground. Bam! Dust flew and craters appeared. Liang Yifan was weak and couldn't get up again. Lu Qing was on top of him, his fist pressed against his temple. The referee approached at high speed. From afar he raised his hand and shouted, "Lu Qing wins." Lu Qing heard and heaved a sigh of relief. He wanted to get up but his legs gave way and he almost fell. He was covered in injuries and his breathing was extremely weak. P.S. Nearly 4,000 words. Chapter 729. Lu Qing wins. Hearing the referee's announcement and looking at the overhead shot, the host in the live broadcast studio let out a sigh of regret. If only Empress Luo had left less of her weakness, Liang Yifan would have won today. Lu Qing had clearly shown signs of fatigue. If only he had seized this opportunity to prevent Liang Yifan from using the simplified wholeness formula, things would have been completely different. Unfortunately, Liang Yifan was also at the end of his rope. Not to mention counterattacking, he couldn't even use force concentration. He had to catch his breath and take a break. Seeing that the host didn't hide his inclination, the guest commentator, He Xiaowei, shook his head and smiled. There's the element of luck. Lu Cheng's left shoulder injury is localized, while Liang Yifan's weakness in the dark sect covered his entire body. There's no way to make an issue out of this. Once there's a problem, there's only one problem left. But as the saying goes, the strong have good luck. Today's match is proof of that. This isn't to say that the strong are blessed by the heavens, unless they have similar talents or special abilities. It's to say that when luck appears, the strong can grasp it. If Lu Cheng hadn't attacked crazily without regard for his own safety and suppressed Liang Yifan to the point of breathlessness, how could he have caused Liang Yifan's problem to erupt prematurely? How could he have struggled back from the brink of defeat? Not to mention the fact that he deliberately showed his inclination towards a battle of attrition. This greatly confused Liang Yifan, and yes, me too. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, the host didn't insist. He sighed. No wonder the physical invulnerability mighty ones all think that Lu Cheng's actual combat ability is top-notch, even though his absolute standard is still lacking. However, with his fighting style, the accumulation of residual injuries has a huge impact on his body. At most, he can only participate in title matches twice a year. This can't be helped. After all, he's the weak against the strong. Wait until the end of the year or next year, when his strength catches up to his performance. That will be a completely different story, he Xiaowei praised. The host nodded, then laughed. Xiaowei, why are you so happy when Liang Yifan lost? You swore that if he didn't get a title in 3 years, you would tattoo a turtle on your head. When did I say tattooed turtle? He Xiaowei rubbed his bald head and asked in amusement. Then he continued, I'm optimistic that he'll get the title within 3 years, but I'm not optimistic that he'll succeed in this warrior sage battle. Look at God-slaying Saber, who's in peak condition and performing extremely well in this competition. Look at Kirin, who's definitely on par with the twin prides and isn't severely injured. Then look at Dragon King, who's picked up a loophole. Even if Liang Yifan manages to enter the top 4, he'll only be able to serve as a foil since he's covered in injuries. You're right. The host nodded lightly and said, I can foresee that sparks will fly in the top 4 in the final. There will most likely be a situation where both sides will suffer. Luckily, the winner won't immediately challenge Warrior Sage. There's still 2 months of rest and adjustment. Otherwise, it would be too unfair. The elimination rounds and final challenge rounds of the 5 major title competitions were always held separately to ensure that the winner of the title deserved it. Just like the Battle of the Kings, the preliminary rounds were held from the middle of August to the beginning of September every year. The elimination rounds to determine the winner were held in the first 2 weeks of December. The best of 3 challenge round against the previous king was held at the end of March to the beginning of April of the following year. Every time a new king was born, the national stage of the University Martial Arts Tournament would begin. The inhuman preliminary rounds of Warrior Sage Battle were held in the middle of January before the new year. The elimination rounds were held in the first 2 weeks of May every year, and the final round was held in the middle of July. During this process, the elimination rounds of Kirin Battle would be held at the end of June to the beginning of July. In order to maintain their form in the Battle of the Warrior Sage, unless they were the current Kirin, they would most likely choose to give up the title, making it look less glamorous. As for the other title competitions, the Master preliminary rounds were held in the end of June, the elimination rounds at the end of October to the beginning of November, and the final challenge round was held during the Chinese New Year. The Supreme Class preliminary rounds were held in November, and the main competition was held in January. After the Chinese New Year, there would be a 4-person cycle battle before the start of the top professional competition to determine the current Supreme Class. The competition schedule was the tightest. The inhuman preliminary rounds of Kirin Battle would be held in the middle of April, and the final challenge round would be held in September. Yeah, He Xiaowei agreed. At this moment in Lu Cheng's fan forum. After Eternal Nightfall, Yan Xiaoling was crazily excited for a while. She said, the last part of my student life was so satisfying. So wonderful. Not only did she pass her internship and get an offer, but her senior had also continuously outperformed himself and defeated several superclass players, successfully making it to the top 4 of Warrior Sage Battle. Thinking of this, she glanced at the information in the forum, slightly embarrassed. She knew that other than Xu Rui's introduction, she had also gotten the title of moderator of Lu Cheng's fan forum. Compared to the cold and quiet scene of just her and Brahmin, this was now one of the few big forums with a terrifying amount of traffic. Seeing her sigh of contentment, Unparalleled Dragon King joked, well said, but I have a question. It's already halfway through May. Have you finished your graduation thesis, Or should I say your graduation project? I'm not too sure what your major requires. Anyway, have you finished your homework? Don't ask this. Yin Shaoling was stunned. After a long while, she said, let me finish watching Warrior Sage battle happily first. Let's enjoy today. Haha, Senior is now ranked 5th in the country, right? 5th among so many mighty ones. As she spoke, she became excited again. It doesn't have to be just the 5th. Brahmin emphasized while swaying. It's fine to say that for now, replied Road to the Arena, who had appeared out of nowhere. Unparalleled Dragon King said, wait until next year, who knows, he might live up to his name. The others chimed in and started a heated discussion. In an instant, dozens of pages of posts had been refreshed. Lu Qing took a deep breath and extended his hand to Liang Yifan, making a gesture of pulling him up. Liang Yifan didn't refuse. He reached out and grabbed it. Standing up, he only felt dejected and disappointed. Without any gloominess or gloom, he gave him a thumbs up and said, you were indeed the better one today. I had better luck, said Lu Qing modestly. Liang Yifan smiled and shook his head. He staggered out of the pit, left the arena, and walked back to his personal resting room. He saw Queen of Thought, Fei Dan, waiting at the door. I'll get you some pills to treat your internal injuries, said the graceful Queen of Thought with a smile. Actually, it's not that bad. Liang Yifan panted and opened the door. Fei Dan strolled behind him and asked casually, how do you feel? It's a pity. If I had accurately predicted his intentions and used the all formula in advance, I wouldn't have been stopped and couldn't use it again. That way I would have had a better chance of winning. But there are no ifs in martial arts. Liang Yifan sighed. Queen of Thought pondered for a moment and smiled. In my opinion, it's mainly because you're too honest and can't be compared to him. All's fair in war. This is what a normal and reasonable battle is like. Liang Yifan shook his head and sighed. In a year or so he'll be even scarier. In the resting room, Lu Qing washed off the dust and cooperated with the doctor to treat his injuries. Yanjika sent a message and asked with concern, how do you feel? When she saw Lu Qing covered in bruises and swaying while receiving the cheers, her heart ached for him. Lu Qing thought for a moment and replied with a smile, it's not too serious, just a lot of injuries. I reckon I'll only be able to recover 70% of my strength by the semi-finals. I fought too hard today. In the last round of crazy battles, he used offense as defense and didn't defend. Even when his opponent counterattacked, he only avoided his vitals and prevented himself from being hit directly. However, it was inevitable that he would be injured by the force, and there were quite a few of them. Without waiting for Yanjika to mention it, he replied with a smirk, that's not the point. The happiness and excitement of winning Liang Yifan can't compare to the other thing. I have to seriously consider how I'm going to spend the day. Yanjika's pretty face immediately turned red. She spat at the screen and said with a dumbfounded expression, why didn't I know you were such a hooligan before? How could you not know? Raised eyebrow and smiled expression. Someone always calls me hooligan, big hooligan, stinky hooligan. You've changed. You weren't like this before. Embarrassed and angry expression, Yanjika replied. In the midst of flirting, Dragon King spent 5 minutes to defeat Luo Xian of Shushan Study without any injuries. The semi-finals of the Warrior Sage battle were officially decided. This was also the first time Lu Qing was in the top 4 of the title battle. As there were only 4 mighty ones left, the lot drawing ceremony was held immediately after. Lu Qing, who was notified, tidied up his clothes, took his phone and left the lounge. He walked towards the stands where the organizing committee was. On the way, Yanjika asked with anticipation, Qing, who do you want to draw? A god-slaying saber. At least I can look forward to seeing him fail miserably. Exhaling expression, Lu Qing replied. This was just a beautiful expectation. Since Lu Yongyuan had lost to him before, he would definitely want to clear his name this time. Yeah. Nodding like a chick pecking at grains expression, Yanjika replied, covering mouth expression. This is the first time I've seen someone compare themselves to a sewer. Lu Qing shook his head and laughed. He had already reached the empty stands. The tall Kirin Dongbaxian, who looked like a classical martial artist with his hair tied in a bun, stood nearby with his hair combed back and the god-slaying saber in his hand. The well-defined Lu Yongyuan was facing him from afar. In less than a minute, the Dragon King Qin Chitao, who was dressed in navy blue, slowly walked over. As he walked, he exuded a majestic aura that made people not dare to look at him directly. The person in charge of the organizing committee held a small microphone and announced loudly, the top 4 of this year's Warrior Sage battle have been decided. They are the 4 best and strongest martial artists recently. They are the Dragon King." His voice suddenly rose. Immediately, earth-shattering shouts came from all around him. "Qin Chi Tao." After announcing them one by one, the person in charge of the organizing committee took out a round ball from a black box and showed it to the surrounding cameras. "Longhu Club Lu Qing. SSS, who will I meet?" Lu Qing straightened his back. Yanjika and the rest also sat up straight and held their breaths. The person in charge of the organizing committee took out another round ball. After taking a look, he laughed and showed it to them. "Longhu Club Dragon King Qin Chi Tao." Dragon King. When he heard these 2 words, Lu Qing suddenly recalled what his master had said when he first started practicing martial arts. Worship? When you can one day completely defeat the martial artist you worship, that will be the greatest respect you can show them. And the martial artist I worship the most is the Dragon King. One of my martial arts dreams is to challenge him in a very important competition. Lu Qing suddenly turned his head and looked to the side. The Dragon King Qin Chi Tao happened to look in his direction as well. He was handsome, tall, majestic, dignified, mature, and had a godlike charm. Under the illumination of the lights, everything seemed like a dream. He would definitely achieve his initial dream. End of Part 5. Chapter 730. Outside the window, the night sky was like water, the lake rippling with light. Lu Qing sat on the recliner, his body blending into the darkness. He didn't make a single sound. His gaze drifted, his vision distant. Just like that, he was lost in thought for a long time. It had been almost a year since he made it to the semi-finals of the Warrior Sage battle and suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the Dragon King. Ever since then, following the advice of Empress Luo and his master, Lu Qing began to tap into the strength in his heart. He attempted to incorporate the various emotions he felt into his main body and present them through his mind to incorporate them into his moves. This wasn't an easy task. It took him a full 8 to 9 months to barely get started. He also benefited from the unique and tragic experience of making the great leap and attaining physical invulnerability. He also benefited from the fact that his parents and master were aging year after year. He also benefited from the fact that the girl he wanted to spend the rest of his life with was temporarily separated from him. He also benefited from the fact that his friends were scattered all over the world, busy with their own affairs and rarely got together. Just like now, as they were nearing graduation, Yenjika's workload and hardships were increasing by the day. She no longer had the time to chat during class. Even when they were back at home, there were too many things to do. They could only make use of the opportunity to communicate. Lu Qing, who had already made a trip to America during the new year, could only watch and wait for the end of June to arrive. He had truly tasted the helplessness and torment of a foreign relationship. Originally, he would restrain this kind of emotion. When feelings of longing and melancholy arose, he would try his best to resolve them, divert his attention, and amuse his little fairy by making jokes. This was because he knew that the other party would definitely have similar feelings. However, in order to tap into the strength in his heart, he could only indulge himself and let those emotions run amok. He tasted the loneliness, the longing, and the pain of not being able to see her. The atmosphere was subtly brewing. In the darkness of the bedroom, there seemed to be a faint yet lingering feeling that was slowly dancing, like a veil of moonlight. "I'm so busy. Your wife is so busy." While she was in the bathroom, Yenjika sent an aggrieved message to him. When the phone screen lit up, Lu Qing felt both heartache and a smile. He broke free from the silence and replied with a smile, "I was going to say that I helped you with it, but when I thought about the last time I flipped through your book, I knew every single word, but when they were put together, I couldn't understand what they were trying to express. I felt like an illiterate person." His self-deprecating words immediately amused the girl, and she felt that the tension and fatigue in her mind had eased a lot. She replied with an emoji of holding her chin and rolling her eyes, "As your life coach, I feel that when we return to China, I need to give you a special lesson. You can't be illiterate." After chatting for a while, she once again threw herself into mental work. Lu Qing's mood also improved. Yes, there are still many beautiful things in life. For example, no matter how busy Ku was, she wouldn't completely neglect the time they spent together. For example, her spring break in March didn't last long, and she had a lot of things to do, but she still traveled a long way and back just to get together with him in less than 2 days. For example, his father was completely worshipped by their boss. He only had to worry about the technical aspects and lived like a second spring. For example, his mother slowly became fashionable. From time to time she would drag his father and aunt to go on a trip. She didn't even need his encouragement anymore. For example, his grandparents were old and healthy, and they were still in good health. For example, his master practiced the 9 words formula diligently, and his spirit nourished his body. Although his old injuries hadn't fully healed, they were completely under control. It didn't seem like a problem for him to live for another 20 or 30 years. For example, his brother-in-law entered the war-torn zones again, and after 8 months of training he found the thing he wanted. He successfully made the great leap and reached the physical invulnerability stage before the end of the year. For example, Hipster broke through 2 months earlier than his brother-in-law. For example, Talker made a name for himself in the martial arts commentary world with his refreshing humor and witty style. Now that he had settled his father's company, he flew to the capital to reunite with his girlfriend. For example, Fatty Jiang finally embarked on the path of matchmaking after tireless efforts. After a few times he had a girlfriend in a restaurant with booming business. For example, after a year of backpacking, Qin Rue vaguely felt the threshold of receiving. For example, after a year of backpacking, Priest and Chihuahua had both gotten their second pin certificates, but clearly had the strength to challenge the first pin. For example, he could now say without a trace of guilt, "My strength is almost at the level of superclass." After the Warrior Sage battle last year, Lu Qing continued to work hard and signed up for the Kirin battle elimination round at the end of June and the beginning of July. Unfortunately, this time he was put under a magnifying glass and suffered a terrifying counterattack from the superclass. Coupled with his bad luck in the draw, he didn't make it through the early stages of double elimination. He wasn't discouraged, but he gave up on the master battle at the end of October and went all out for the Battle of the Kings in December. This time, despite his bad luck, he made it through several rounds and entered the top 8. Following that, he shone in the Battle of Supreme Class, and made it to the top 4 for the second time. He was only one step away from getting the final spot in the round-robin battle of the top 4, plus the champion. Unfortunately, he first lost to the Warrior Sage, then lost to Dong Baxian. However, since then his superclass strength was recognized and no one doubted him. As of last week, all 5 title battles had finished their finals and were about to enter a new round. In the previous round, Dragon King had won the challenge and defeated Qian Donglu to win the Warrior Sage title. However, in the new year he lost to his old nemesis and lost the honor of the king. In addition, Qian Donglu had successfully defended his Grandmaster title and Dragon King had reclaimed his superclass title. However, Dong Baxian had narrowly kept his Kirin title and prevented the legendary twins from taking all the glory. In the previous year's top professional matches, Longhu Club was extremely unlucky. Their main players were injured in several key matches and in the end, they could only surrender the title of world number 1 to Shanqing Sect. At this point in time, almost everyone believed that Warrior Sage and Dragon King were the best of the best among the physical invulnerability experts. However, everyone knew that this phase was coming to an end. In 2 or 3 years, they would most likely achieve a breakthrough and no longer participate in such matters. Thoughts floated in his mind. Lu Qing recalled for a moment, then lowered his head to read a novel and play a game. At some point he closed the app and lay back in the darkness. After a long silence, he put his phone aside and played an audio clip. Lu Qing. Lu Qing. Go Lu Qing. Her soft and clear voice echoed in the room over and over again. Just as dawn broke, Amin heard the ear-piercing sound of the alarm clock. She wriggled around for a minute before finally sitting up and returning the room to silence. She rubbed her eyes. Using the dim light, she sized up the warm, girlish decorations and decorations around her. She felt a sense of security and joy blossoming in her heart. This was because this was a home that truly belonged to her. On the day she became the assistant of a physical invulnerability expert for a full year, she took out her savings and bought a house for herself. As the neighborhood and surrounding facilities were relatively good, she had to rely on a loan. However, the process was very easy and simple. After that, she asked her parents to come over and help supervise the renovations. After a long period of drying, she officially moved in the day before yesterday. Those who had never rented a house before would find it hard to understand her desperate desire to have a home in Huaqing. This was because living in someone else's place, even if it was a dorm provided by the company, would give her a sense of uncertainty that she would leave sooner or later. Back when she was renting a house, she would have to move out from time to time due to the increase in price, or when the landlord wanted to take back the house that was given to her for her children. Every time she would be physically and mentally exhausted. Now, no one could force her to move out because this was her home. Amin stretched herself and got out of bed to wash up. When she saw her improved skin in the mirror, she felt even happier. At the same time, she understood that everything now was because of her boss, the superclass mighty one Mr. Lu Cheng. Speaking of which, he was a very restrained person in all aspects. For the past year, other than going to America and Xioshan, he had led a regular and simple life. Even when he wasn't practicing martial arts, his entertainment was mostly online. Moreover, he had a lot of self-control and would stop when the time was right. He didn't play too much, just like in Miss Xu Rui's entering the physical invulnerability program. He wasn't like this for a day or two but for 300 to 400 days. After her bestie watched the program, she specially came over to ask about it. After getting confirmation from her, she said emotionally, "I heard that people who are successful in martial arts have a strong desire in that aspect, let alone a physical invulnerability mighty one. Look at your boss, he's practically the epitome of asceticism. Introverted, self-disciplined, restrained. He seems approachable but keeps a distance from temptation. I wonder what kind of expression he'll have when he's in bed. If there's a chance, I really can't help but try to seduce him and see if I can make him break." Her bestie's words were getting more and more ridiculous. Almond didn't know how to respond, but she couldn't help but think occasionally. What would Mr. Lu be like in front of Miss Yen? Pulling out a soft tissue, Almond wiped her face clean. She patted herself and stopped her previous thoughts. She knew very well why she was able to get this job that everyone was envious of. Seriousness, kindness, diligence, attentiveness, and most importantly her responsibilities. After tidying herself up, she walked out of the room and saw her parents laying out breakfast. "Smells so good." She beamed and walked over briskly. Mr. Lu had to train at home today and would only leave for the airport at 7:50 a.m. Therefore, she didn't have to reach his villa at 5:30 a.m. and could enjoy the breakfast made with love. At 7:45 a.m., Almond left the silver-gray MPV. After waiting for a few minutes, she saw Lu Cheng walking out of the villa with his luggage. "Morning, Mr. Lu." She smiled and greeted him. "Morning." Lu Cheng nodded with a smile. Almond stepped aside and watched the car door open by itself. She pointed inside and said, "The breakfast you asked for is ready." "Emma." Lu Cheng got into the car and sat in his usual seat. He pointed at the numerous dishes and said, "You should join us." "It's okay. Thank you, Mr. Lu. I've already eaten. My mom made it." Almond smiled sweetly. Breakfast made by her parents? Lu Cheng was stunned for a moment. He remembered how his mom used to cook beef with bamboo shoots. She would cook a huge pot and put it in the fridge. In the morning she would take it out and put a big spoonful into the fridge. Then he recalled the mornings in Connecticut. Every time Aunt Du was on vacation, someone would volunteer to cook for her. However, she had to drag him along. In the process he came up with a lot of Chinese and Western ideas. As for the taste, it was up to him to decide. Thinking of this, he exhaled silently. After a few minutes of contemplation, he calmed down and ate his breakfast. "Mr. Lu, are you going directly to the airport?" Almond asked for confirmation. Lu Cheng nodded. On April 11th, which was tomorrow, his master would be celebrating his 65th birthday. As his disciple he had to go to Moshang. P.S. I recommend a book, Purple Heaven. The author of the book, Endless Artifacts, studied Taoism when he was in his second year of middle school and claimed to be able to resist poison. I quite like the theme of this book, preaching Taoism. Chapter 731. Wuxia Province, Moshang City, Shiyue Jian's villa. As soon as Lu Cheng walked in and greeted his senior sister, he saw a few seniors sitting on the sofa. Facing him was the divine enchanter of Sin Flame. He still looked like a middle-aged man with deep eye sockets, a straight nose, black hair mixed with silver strands and flame-like brilliance hidden in his deep eyes. He looked quiet and reserved, but he gave people a feeling of irritation and fear. Lu Cheng recalled the first time he saw this senior, and the fear and caution he felt when he couldn't see through him. At this moment he vaguely grasped his level with the help of his aura. It was a superclass with a strong mind and a blend of artistic conception, but it was obviously declining. Unknowingly, I can already look at this senior on the same level. Lu Cheng felt a little emotional. Sitting on the sofa beside the divine enchanter of Sin Flame were the elegant queen of thought, Fei Dan, who looked to be in her 30s, and the empty nest old man, Wu Maoyan, who was smoking a cigar lazily. They smiled and turned to look at Lu Cheng, occasionally glancing at Geezer Sher with a teasing look. The white-haired Geezer Sher with few wrinkles turned his head and frowned in disdain. "Why did you rush here? It's just a few old guys who insisted that I celebrate my birthday every 5 days. According to our customs, we usually celebrate the 9th. TSK, in terms of nominal years, it's actually the 10th. Rush here? Judging from this word, Master, you're actually quite happy, aren't you? Lu Cheng laughed inwardly and said sternly, as a disciple, how can I miss my master's birthday? Master, what you're implying is that you want to hold a grand celebration on your nominal year of 70. Well, now that your injuries are under control and you're not coughing nonstop after a few activities, you're back to your old self. And you've taken me in as a good disciple. How can you not show off? If Geezer sure knew what he was thinking at this moment, he would probably want to kick this unfilial disciple to death. He shook his hand and clicked his tongue. You think I don't know you? You're only good with words. Didn't you just call me a few years ago? Hey, you've only come here once. Lu Cheng was stunned. After more than 10 seconds he opened his mouth and said, Master, you were the one who said that there was no need to come? He knew that his master's birthday was only 3 years away. In 1 year he was a part-time coach and was fighting in the National University Martial Arts Tournament. In the other year he had just broken his Jindan and got rid of the sequelae. He was recuperating in the mountains and couldn't go on a long trip. Yet, he went to the military sanatorium in the north for a vacation. I didn't expect you to be such a petty and vengeful old man. Just because I said you don't need to, you don't need to? This is a test of your sincerity. Smelly brat, why don't you think about the history? What Menli Shui? Geezer sure was in a good mood as he jokingly scolded her. Then he pointed at the living room and said, Find yourself a seat. Lu Cheng greeted each of his seniors and found a single sofa to sit down. He put on a pose that said, I only have ears and won't interrupt. Wu Malian took a puff of the cigar and chuckled. Establishing a country. How many times have I told you? Don't call me by my name. Geezer sure interrupted him angrily. Wu Malian chuckled and muttered to himself, Looking at you just now, I thought you had accepted an unworthy disciple. Why don't we make a deal and transfer your disciple to me? Sai, speaking of which, you usually don't show off your skills as a master. How did you manage to train a physical invulnerability disciple so easily? The few of us have been together for so many years, but we still haven't managed to train a good successor. Don't drag me into this. My last disciple is already a physical invulnerability expert, Queen of Thought, Fei Dan interjected. She was referring to the sleeping tiger and Chaoyang. You lazy old man. How can you be better than me in teaching disciples? Geezer sure said proudly. Speaking of which, Lin K from Geezer G's house was also guided by me when he reached the dance stage. In just 2 years, he had already laid the foundation for 2 physical invulnerability experts. Hey, it's not that I'm looking down on you guys, but compared to this, you guys are still too far away. Lu Cheng almost burst out laughing when he heard this. However, with his strong self-control, he maintained a serious expression and nodded in agreement with his master. Shi Yuejian also pursed her lips and secretly gave Lu Cheng a thumbs up. She walked into the kitchen and prepared a sumptuous lunch. This kind of thing, Divine Enchanter of Sin Flame snorted. It's up to the heavens, not the man. Good seedlings are rare, and it's easy for others to snatch them away. What are you talking about? Didn't you take in a good disciple? In the end, you brought him to the war-torn zones and surrounded him. He was half dead and was stuck at the inhuman stage for the rest of his life, Geezer sure retorted. Divine Enchanter of Sin Flame replied angrily, It's all because I wanted to meet you. Haven't you made enough mistakes in the war-torn zones? You have enemies everywhere. Now I have to say something fair, Wu Malian chuckled. Jianghu, Geezer sure did a better job than you in the war-torn zones. Once, he fell into a trap and was surrounded by 3 physical invulnerability experts. It was the guy called God of War who led them, but he still managed to force his way out. However, he was bedridden for 2 months and had to be served. If they hadn't teamed up, I could have beaten any one of them up. Geezer sure said disdainfully. Using this topic as an excuse, a few of the old veterans started to reminisce about their past. Sometimes they would talk about what they had done in the war-torn zones. Other times, they would brag about how half of the 20 titles that Queen of Thought had won were because they hadn't participated in professional competitions back then. However, Fei Dan's calm words shut them up. She said, If you lose to me 7 times out of 10, don't speak. Hence, Shi Jianghu, Wu Malian, and Divine Enchanter all fell silent. If you're so capable, let's compete in actual combat. If I wasn't severely injured later on. Geezer sure mumbled after a few seconds. Then with lightning speed he changed the topic back to his past in the war-torn zones. At his peak, he and Queen of Thought were on the same level. They were both half a step away from the forbidden zone. Unfortunately, they couldn't break through and could only sigh as they watched their successors. Lu Cheng listened thoughtfully but resisted the urge to speak. After lunch, the seniors went upstairs to take a nap. Then he asked Shi Jianghu at the stairs, "Master, who was the taboo expert who injured you back then?" Geezer Shi glanced at him and laughed. "What? Do you want to avenge your master? Are you that confident of entering the forbidden zone? At this point, how can I not imagine an attempt to break through? But your disciple knows very well that it's very difficult." "It will take 10 to 20 years, answered Lu Qing frankly. "When the time comes, if I succeed, I can fulfill my duty as a disciple and avenge you, master." "Avenge what?" said Geezer Shi in annoyance. "I can eat, sleep, drink, and jump now. It won't be a problem for me to live another 20 to 30 years. If I were to fight to the death with a forbidden mighty one over my injuries, the number of people seeking revenge on me would line up from here to the city. It's not worth it, not worth it." At this point he chuckled. "Unless I die prematurely because of this in the future and can't die of old age, then there's a need for revenge. Otherwise all I have to do is to disgust the other party and ruin their plans. But master, your chances of breaking through will be cut off because of this." Lu Qing sighed inwardly. Then a doubt arose in his mind. He frowned and pondered for a moment. He couldn't help but ask, "When the time comes, how do you determine whether you'll die of old age or prematurely because of this?" "No one knows how long they'll live." Geezer Shi was stunned when he heard this question. Then he blew his beard and glared at him. "You brat, you really want your master to die? Nothing good comes out of a dog's mouth." Lu Qing's expression froze. Geezer Shi snorted and walked up the stairs with his hands behind his back. Halfway up, he suddenly sighed. "Actually, when I was seriously injured, I had no hope of breaking through the man-god boundary. I was already in my 50s. Unless I was 10 years younger." His tone was complicated. He didn't stop walking and disappeared around the corner of the stairs. Lu Qing listened in a daze, feeling a little down. He walked up to the second floor step by step and happened to see Queen of Thought, Fei Dan, coming from the balcony at the end of the corridor. "Your master is right. At our age, the most difficult and natural thing to do is to accept old age. It has nothing to do with outsiders." She nodded with a smile. Then she walked past Lu Qing and headed for the guest room. She shook her head and sighed. Birth, old age, sickness and death are hard. With birth comes aging. Chapter 732. The next night in the Shi family villa. Several chefs were busy preparing the dishes. The physical invulnerability experts were sitting around a table, chatting and tasting the delicious food to celebrate Geezer Shi's 65th birthday. He didn't invite any outsiders to his birthday banquet. Other than his old friends like the Queen of Thought and the Divine Enchanter of Sin Flame, his senior brother, his own daughter, his unfilial disciple, and other physical invulnerability experts from the Ice God sect. Of course, the Haishi sect, Hanqi sect, and Dinghai sect of the Wuxia alliance had all sent qualified disciples to celebrate with wine. Lu Qing was quietly listening to the elders boasting about the past. Suddenly he felt something and turned to look at the door. The Queen of Thought, Fei Dan, had a similar reaction. Geezer Shi and the rest followed in confusion. At this time the sky was dark and the rain was light. Spring was coming. After a few seconds, Shi Jianghu suddenly asked in confusion. Shi Yuejin was confused at first. Then her eyes lit up. She stood up, walked quickly to the door and opened it. In the drizzling rain outside the door, a tall and majestic figure in navy blue approached slowly with 2 old jars in his hands. Every drop of water that approached him would automatically evaporate without leaving a trace. It was Dragon King Qin Chitao. As soon as he appeared, the living room and dining room that were connected to each other suddenly became silent. All eyes were on him as he approached in the bleak wind and rain, like a big sun that rose in reverse. Qin Chitao walked slowly into the villa without any rain. He didn't need to pretend to be majestic. Shi Yuejin, who was waiting at the door, forgot to open her mouth. So did everyone else. Step by step, Dragon King walked to the dining table and placed the 2 old jars in front of Geezer Shi. The cups and plates moved automatically to make enough space for Dragon King. Yaozhou Ancient Cellar Wine. Qin Chitao patted the seal of one of the jars. A memorable aroma filled the air. Geezer Shi came back to his senses and laughed. "I remember there were only 5 jars left. You took half of them. Brat, get another chair." Lu Qing was enlightened when he heard the order. The Dragon King was here to celebrate his birthday. It was just that no one had expected that the atmosphere just now would be as if an enemy had come to exterminate them. His master had most likely just casually invited him, and had never considered the possibility of him actually coming. Of course, the Dragon King's unsmiling and dignified aura was also largely to blame. While cursing in his heart, he and Shi Yuejin found a chair in the guest room and put it next to their master. The Dragon King didn't stand on ceremony and sat down. Back then, back when we were in the war-torn zones, I didn't see you give this old man any wine. Why did you suddenly think of this today? Comrade Shi Jianghu said half jokingly and half emotionally. It wasn't your birthday at that time. Chen Chitao's poker face didn't change as he answered seriously. Everyone fell silent again, not knowing what to say. What a joke. The Dragon King really has no sense of humor. Another form of the king of awkward silence. This was the first time Lu Qing had seen Chen Chitao in such a situation. He couldn't help but complain in his heart. Geezer sure laughed dryly and shook his head. You haven't changed at all. You haven't changed at all. But this troublesome disciple of mine, I'll have to trouble you to beat him up. Master, he's really beating him up. Lu Qing felt pain all over when he heard the word. After losing to the Dragon King in the Warrior Sage battle, his attitude didn't change. He didn't support his juniors like the rumors said, and was hostile to qualified competitors. He probably felt that he was still not mature enough to pose a threat to Meng Qi. Thinking about it, in the first challenge in the official competition, although he only had 70% of his strength left due to his injuries, he didn't expect to lose so easily and miserably. It was almost like he was hung up and beaten. He truly understood why the Peerless Twins were called the Peerless Twins when they were in perfect condition. In any case, the beating he received once or twice a week had never decreased. However, in the past year he could be considered to have made rapid progress. In his daily practice, although the number of times he won was few, he was finally starting to win. However, every time he won, the next round was bound to be a terrifying counterattack. The inhumane beating was simply unbearable to recall. Just thinking about it was painful. Of course, it was because of this kind of beating that he could improve so quickly. In less than 2 years he could call himself a superclass with a clear conscience. You're welcome. The Dragon King didn't even look at Lu Qing, but his expression was gentle. It was as though this was an activity that could entertain him. Lu Qing couldn't help but touch the corner of his mouth. This injury healed again and again. His teeth grew out again and again. It was almost an old problem. Since the Dragon King had been in the war-torn zones and shared a common language with the Queen of Thought, the atmosphere of the banquet gradually returned to normal. There was no doubt that he listened more than he spoke, but every time he spoke, the table would fall silent. If that god of war could hear your evaluation, his descendants wouldn't be able to hold his coffin board down. Wu Maoyan shook his head at the Dragon King's vicious and mean comments. He was the only one present who could say that. Of course, because the god of war had died at his hands. Geezer sure also recalled his memories. He was about to brag about his experience of killing a mighty one of the same level when he suddenly saw the Dragon King glance at the door. Immediately after, his unworthy disciple stood up and walked over with a smile. He opened the door and said, "You came at the right time." Lin Kei's expression didn't change in the slightest because of his nonsense. He also carried 2 jars of wine and came to Geezer Shi's side. After a few seconds of silence he said, "Coach Shi, my grandparents asked me to bring 2 jars of wine that they buried at home for 20 years. I wish you happiness as boundless as the East Sea and longevity as long as the South Mountain." When he was saying the congratulatory words, Lu Qing smiled and waited for his brother-in-law to show signs of stuttering or embarrassment. However, Lin Kei was calm and composed from beginning to end. He didn't show any other reaction. Such an awkward and old-fashioned line? What kind of mood did you have to say it so smoothly? Lu Qing secretly shook his head and muttered silently, "Boring, boring." In a villa beside the Wuxia club, the dull and stiff Huang Ku finished wiping the ice chi spear. He took out a bottle of wine carved from green jade from the wine cabinet and poured himself a glass. The color was close to amber. His disciple, Jianghu, who was still working hard to reach the physical invulnerability stage, asked curiously, "Master, why do you suddenly want to drink?" His master had always been a collector and appreciator. Another disciple, Qian Qiue, looked at the balcony and said, "Today is the 65th birthday of Senior Shi of the Ice God sect. Master, do you want to give him a bottle of wine?" But why did he want to taste it first? Huang Ke didn't speak. Holding the wine glass, he walked slowly to the balcony and looked in the direction of the Shi family. After a moment of silence he said, "There's no need. We don't have much of a relationship." At this point, his tone suddenly became a little uncertain. "When I entered the sect, he was at the peak of his glory. I've always had him as my goal and wanted to find a chance to challenge him. Unfortunately, I couldn't achieve this wish. And now? A rare smile appeared on his face. We're both old. For experts like them, even if they were 30 years older, it would still be easy for them to defeat an inhuman. However, compared to the youths of the same level, they had to admit that they were old. Spear King Huangke didn't sigh. He raised his wine glass and drank it in the direction of the Shi family. He toasted them from afar. After the birthday banquet, some bade farewell, while others continued to talk about the past. Lu Qing was afraid that his brother-in-law wouldn't like such occasions, so he pulled him to the quiet balcony and asked with a smile, "You've been through a lot in the war-torn zones this time, right?" "A lot," Lin Ke answered simply. "What are they?" Lu Qing asked with great interest. "Too long," Lin Ke answered with the usual awkward silence. Lu Qing's mouth twitched, then he smiled and said, "Then how did you make the great leap and become a physical invulnerability expert?" "Just like that," Lin Ke answered calmly. "Can't we have a proper conversation?" Lu Qing lowered his head and sent a message to Ku. "Your brother is killing the conversation." Lin Ke watched as he typed on the virtual keyboard. Then he said slowly, "In the war-torn zones, some things are more important than talking." "Yeah." Lu Qing nodded thoughtfully. "If I have a mission there in the future, I'll help out a little. The physical invulnerability experts there probably won't welcome me." After a few seconds of silence, he changed the topic. "Are you going to participate in the Battle of Warrior Sage next month?" "Yes," Lin Ke answered simply. "Well, what's your goal?" he asked casually. Lin Ke looked up and stared at him with his dark eyes. "To defeat you." "Brother-in-law, are you serious or are you joking?" Lu Qing was stunned. Lin Ke turned around and walked towards the guest room. When he was about to leave the balcony, he added, "I'll always work hard." Chapter 733. Watching Lin Ke's figure disappear into the distance, Lu Qing suddenly laughed. "It's great that my brother-in-law has such determination. Even if Dragon King and Warrior Sage were to break through to the Forbidden Zone in 2 or 3 years and no longer participate in the challenge tournament, the circle wouldn't wither away. At that time, Qirandong Bashin, God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan, and the other experts would be at the last but also the strongest peak. Wisdom King Zhihai would probably be one step further. Even if Priest and Chihuahua hadn't gotten the title yet, they would most likely be in the ranks of the superclass. In addition, there would be his brother-in-law who was chasing after him, the clown who was working hard to become the strongest, the living Buddha who possessed the wisdom of past eras, the evening light Liang Yifan, the Optimus Prime Long Zhen, and the heavens equal sword Feng Zhi in their prime. The situation would be even more exciting than it was now. Thinking about the future, Lu Qing's heart was in turmoil. As his thoughts flew, he suddenly shook his head and sighed. He turned to look out of the balcony. That kind of future was beautiful, but the present was equally important. If he couldn't snatch at least one title from Dragon King and Warrior Sage before they broke through to the Forbidden Zone, it would be such a pity. This was the obsession of a martial artist. Therefore, he had to seize every opportunity of a title battle. For example, the new Warrior Sage battle half a month from now. After another morning, Lu Qing returned to the living room after finishing his training in the Shi family's garden. The moment he stepped through the door, he saw his master lying lazily on the sofa. In front of him were wine jars, cups, beans, peanuts, and other things. "This life is so decadent," Lu Qing muttered to himself. That was true. His master wasn't like other old people who had hobbies like planting flowers, playing cards, and fishing. He also didn't have the desire for power like the sect masters and martial uncles. His television was mostly focused on martial arts shows. All he did was laze around drinking and watching competitions. Once in a month or two he would go to the military base to cooperate with experiments or visit his old friends. A very unhealthy and monotonous life. I have to cultivate some hobbies for master. Judging from the way he is, he probably wouldn't care even if senior sister and senior sister had a kid. There's actually a good example in this regard. Talker's father couldn't be busy because of his illness. After returning home to recuperate, he somehow fell in love with computer games. He didn't like anything else but the romance of the Three Kingdoms series. Since Master likes wine so much and doesn't lack money, he could totally participate in wine collection and appraisal activities. Lu Qing slowed down as thoughts flashed through his mind. "Brat, what's with your expression?" Geezer Shi was once a top-notch physical invulnerability expert. He turned his head abruptly and glared at his disciple. Lu Qing laughed dryly and said, "I was thinking, Master, wouldn't it be too boring for you to just stay at home and drink?" Geezer Shi snorted and said disdainfully, Didn't I, this old man, work so hard for most of my life just so that I can drink a little wine comfortably like this? You are so thoughtful. Lu Qing was speechless for a moment. After lunch, he tidied himself up, picked up his luggage and left. He had to prepare himself mentally and spiritually for the warrior sage battle. Shangqing Sect Martial Arts Hall. Many inhuman martial artists surrounded the hall, watching the physical invulnerability experts perform the unique skills of the Thunder Sect. This was their monthly benefit. In the hall, figures crossed each other as wind and thunder danced. Only one area was calm and peaceful. Beside the main pillar was a lounge chair. An elegant white-robed man with a Taoist hairstyle was half leaning on it. He looked extremely relaxed. He was none other than Chen Donglu, the one with the eternal title of Warrior Sage. Of course he had temporarily lost this title. However, he had snatched the title of King, the Heavenly King of the Thunder Sect, to deliver punishment on behalf of the heavens. At this moment, he was squinting his eyes from the sunlight shining through the glazed roof tiles. He looked as though he would fall asleep at any moment. He didn't show any signs of joining the drill. The Shangqing Sect disciples were already used to his behavior and turned a blind eye to it. It was said that the reason why warrior sage Chen Donglu was able to achieve breakthroughs so quickly when he was young was because he felt that once he reached the physical invulnerability stage, he wouldn't be urged by his teachers and could slack off. This mentality only changed when he met Dragon King Qin Shi Tao and was almost beaten to a pulp by him. Unknowingly, time flew by. Peng Liyun stopped and rested for a while. Not bad. You're progressing fast, said Chen Donglu with a smile, looking at Lu Qing with no proper posture. Phew. I'm still an unstable first pin. The silver light around Peng Liyun flashed and sizzled. Very good, said Chen Donglu with a chuckle. If I'm slow, I'll probably break through in 2 to 1 year. When that time comes, the reputation of the Shangqing Sect in the professional martial arts circle will depend on you guys. You'll be the one supporting it. When he talked about the forbidden domain, he was calm and confident. A year? I should be close to the superclass in a year. I can compete with Lu Qing again. Peng Liyun nodded thoughtfully. Shortly after, he thought of something else. I've been working hard to modify the unique skills of the Thunder Sect with modern physics research, but to no avail. Thunder and electricity have been clearly separated. Electricity is an electromagnetic wave, a manifestation of one of the 4 fundamental forces. The weak interaction force and electromagnetic force have long been unified. I'll probably be poor for 10-20 years, or even a lifetime on this path of modification. As he pondered, he felt a tingling sensation all over his body. Shortly after, he woke up. You're in a daze again, said Chen Donglu with certainty and not doubt as he got up slowly. The surrounding electric sparks suddenly became active with his movements. This was why Peng Liyun was woken up. Thinking about something, answered Peng Liyun honestly. However, he noticed that Chen Donglu's expression was full of disbelief. A person who was used to daydreaming didn't need an excuse. Peng Liyun didn't try to explain. Instead he asked, Martial uncle, are you going to train? Chen Donglu smiled. Yeah. I have to be more serious. At this point he stretched his neck and added a few words of explanation. I should break through earlier than Qin Shi Tao. I can't let him surpass me and become the one with the most titles when I'm in the forbidden zone and not participating in title matches. I have to take advantage of the next 1 or 2 years to get more titles and widen the gap. Anyway, he's only a year or so behind me. He's really calculative, especially when compared to Dragon King. Peng Liyun didn't want to tease his martial uncle. Now Chen Donglu was firmly in first place with 23 titles. Dragon King Qin Shi Tao and Queen of Thought Fei Dan were tied for second place with 20 titles each. King of Swords Wuxia was in fourth place with 19 titles. However, with Qin Shi Tao's strength, it would only take him a year or so to surpass Queen of Thought. Peng Liyun retracted his gaze and looked around the hall. Seeing Yun Yin, Ming He, and the other physical invulnerability experts practicing, he took a deep breath and rejoined the ranks. I feel like I'm missing someone. He frowned slightly and threw this thought to the back of his mind. Hashi City, Kongtong Hotel, 33rd floor. As it was within the sect's territory, Renli had entered a week earlier. She wanted to use the gradually bustling atmosphere of the warrior sage battle to train her mind and make sufficient preparations. After returning from Jiuwen Dojo, she took a special elevator with her assistant and returned to her residence. Walking along the thickly carpeted corridor, the cute little assistant couldn't help but steal a glance at her martial uncle. Kongtong School had a tradition that had only been around for a few decades. It was to use juniors with mediocre mentors with potential as assistants of physical invulnerability experts. This was to change them every 2 years so that they could be influenced by what they see and hear. They would be able to see things from a high vantage point and receive guidance from the experts. Martial Uncle Ren already has the strength of a first pin at such a young age. She has a high winning rate against those of the same level. She also occasionally succeeds in challenges. By the end of the year, she will most likely have a first pin certificate. Moreover, she can occasionally defeat Martial Granduncle Qi and Martial Uncle Feng when sparring within the sect. She is indeed a heavenly son of the era and a future mighty one with a title. The little assistant's eyes sparkled as she thought. Suddenly she heard an abnormal beeping sound. She looked up and saw Renly standing in front of a door. She swiped her room card again and again but still couldn't open it. She looked lost and was biting her lips slightly as though she had been wronged. Seeing her assistant look over, Renly nodded solemnly. The room card is broken. The assistant was stunned for a second. She immediately raised her head and looked at the room number. Then she covered her face and said, "Martial Uncle, this isn't your room. One ending with an 8 and the other ending with an 0. How could I get it wrong? I just got distracted for a moment. How did it become like this?" "I see." Renly suddenly understood and said confidently, "I was wondering why I couldn't open it." After saying that, she turned around and walked away. Then, she was pulled back by her assistant and silently pointed to the other side. After the matter was corrected, the real door was in sight. The assistant heaved a sigh of relief and said half-jokingly, "Martial Uncle Ren, the door was closed." "Martial Uncle Ren, it's a good thing that the door to the room is closed. Otherwise, what if there's an overbearing president inside? Someone once said this to me." Renly's memory was evoked. "Then what did you say?" the little assistant asked curiously. "I forgot. If it was now, he would do whatever he wanted." Renly replied calmly, "I would throw him out of the window." "Gary." The little assistant reached out to take the room card and opened the door to the suite. As soon as she entered, she followed Renly's habit and turned on the television to a special channel. There was a program on the screen and the guest commentator said passionately, "The challenge of this competition is to see who can stop the warrior sage. We have listed 4 candidates. Based on their performance over the past year, they are the best of the best. They are Kirin Dong Baxian, God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan, Wisdom King Ji Hai and Sky-shaking Ho Lu Cheng, who wants the title of God King." Chapter 734. It was near the end of May. The night was clear and breezy. The sky was as dark as a blanket, dotted with diamonds. In Jianghu Stadium in Heshi City, lights shone brightly, making the stadium and stands as bright as day. The voice of the organizer reverberated. The top 4 of this year's Warrior Sage battle have been officially announced. They are the ones with the permanent title of Warrior Sage. He deliberately paused for a moment, allowing the audience to erupt into a tsunami of cheers. Chen Donglu. Lu Cheng suddenly felt as though he was in a dream. It was as though he had returned to last year. It was the same scene and the same commotion. The only difference was that the names were different. Chen Qitao was replaced by Chen Donglu. Yes, he had once again overcome all the difficulties and made it to the top 4 of the Warrior Sage battle. However, as a seed, he had to guide the Inhumans in the first round and avoid the superclass in the second round. Amidst the cheers, he looked around and saw the remaining 3. Other than Warrior Sage Chen Donglu, there was also Kirin Dong Baxian and Morning Star Renly, whom he hadn't expected at all. The fact that this girl, who would never admit defeat and always wanted to stir up trouble, could make it this far made Lu Qing wonder if she was really blessed with a supernatural ability. Along the way, Renly had only met a superclass player in the quarterfinals, and he was even the oldest player in the professional scene, Sword King Wu Kuang, who was 1 year older than her. Sword King Wu Kuang, who had been counterattacked by the clown during the quarterfinals, had barely won after a long and arduous battle. In the previous journey she had picked in Chaoyang, who had just advanced and easily defeated him. Lu Cheng could only sigh at the fact that hipsters were always bullied by girls. In the second round, Renly met the second pin physical invulnerability expert, which Qian Hui. Relying on her terrifying intuition, she successfully broke through her opponent's Art of Illusion sect and her innate hypnosis ability and entered the top 32. When she entered the top 16, her opponent was the soul-hooking sword Song Changting, who was also a second pin martial uncle. In the round of 16 she finally met a strong opponent. However, in an environment where most potential opponents were superclass, she had picked Ocean Tide Yu Guanzhong, a first pin from Xuanwu sect. That was enough to prove that her luck was shining. Compared to Qian Donglu, the warrior sage who had been competing with the strongest since the round of 32, was as unlucky as an African chieftain. At this thought, Lu Qing couldn't help but take another look at Qian Donglu. In the round of 32 he encountered the Wisdom King Zhihai. In the round of 16 he fought the Empress Luo Ningzitong. In the round of 8 he fought the god-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan. Every match was an intense battle, and every match was a tough one. Especially today, Lu Yongyuan was even stronger than his opponent. The more he fought, the crazier he got. He almost proved himself once again and almost defeated the warrior sage. Although he failed in the end, he almost severely injured the warrior sage. By the time of the semifinals the day after tomorrow, he could at most recover 70%. Lu Qing retracted his gaze from Qian Donglu's face and nodded thoughtfully. Originally this wasn't a big deal, but with Rinli as a comparison, the warrior sage seemed to be too weak. Of course, this wasn't to say that Rinli relied on pure luck. In the previous few titles her luck had always been good, but she didn't achieve much. Now that she was in the semifinals, it was more because she already had the standard of a first pin. With this foundation her luck played a role. In the past she might not even have been able to beat the Tide Yu Guanzhong, let alone the King of Swords Wuxia. Compared to her he obviously wasn't as lucky. But looking at the warrior sage he seemed to be doing well. Not mentioning the first 2 rounds, he had encountered the living Buddha Shi Shan in the round of 16. With the combination of cultivation, mental strength, and a catching up level, he finally redeemed himself and defeated an opponent in peak condition for the first time. Although his mental strength was damaged after the match and he was badly hurt and had a splitting headache, the 9 words formula was good at treating such problems. By the time of the round of 16, he had basically recovered and didn't have any hidden problems. Lu Qing's opponent in the round of 16 was the priest. After a long time he once again encountered him in a crucial official arena. Relying on his advantage in strength, he won after a fierce battle and didn't suffer any injuries. Even though he won, Lu Qing couldn't help but feel that the Taoist martial arts were a little strange. He had a vague premonition that the Taoist was brewing or cultivating some kind of terrifying monster. In time he might become a super mighty one that couldn't be ignored. Thinking of his own advancement process, Lu Qing couldn't help but think about the things that Peng Liyun had hidden in the unique skills of the Thunder sect. To be more precise, it should be called a train of thought. Lu Qing. The roaring of the audience woke him up. Inexplicably, the scene of the quarterfinals flashed before his eyes. His opponent was Ma Xinghong, the long dike that protects the sea. His black tortoise sword and the unique skills of the water sect were indeed extraordinary, and he deserved the title of superclass. However, Ming Qi had lived up to the pressure he received from the Dragon King and his own growth over the past year. After solving many troubles, he finally won. Of course, the injuries left behind weren't light. It would be a blessing if he could recover 80 to 90% by the time of the semifinals. Amidst his thoughts, Lu Qing felt a throbbing pain in his back, chest, arms and legs. In the VIP box, the empty nest old man Wu Maoyan sat side by side with his good friend Shi Jianghu. Smoking his hand-rolled cigarette, he chuckled. The student has surpassed the master. You've taught a good disciple. Surpassed the master? Too early. Geezer sure snorted. Back then, if I had participated in the title battle, it would have been easy for me to win more than 10 titles. Unlike him, he hasn't even won the right to challenge once. There was no Dragon King and Warrior Sage back then. Wu Maoyan lampooned silently. Then he smiled. I see that you're quite free coming here to watch the competition. Why don't you take in a few disciples and train them well so that they can contribute to the sect in the country? Geezer sure glanced at him and chuckled. It's not like you don't know me. It's good enough to have an unworthy disciple. Why would I have extra time for leisure? Tell me, Geezer Wu. Is there a backdoor entrant who wants to be my disciple and wants to talk to you? You could have just accepted him. At least he's only slightly weaker than me. I've seen through you. You're even more lazy than me. Wu Maoyan avoided the topic. At this moment, the semi-finals were about to begin. He cast his gaze outside. Geezer sure smiled to himself and mumbled to himself, if I take in a few more disciples and they don't turn into physical invulnerability experts, wouldn't that be embarrassing? That brat would be so smug too. Looking at the organizing committee reaching into the box, Lu Qing tried his best to keep his breathing steady. To me and Chihuahua, the best outcome would be to draw each other and let Warrior Sage and Kirin fight each other. Dong Bashan's advancement process was similar to mine. He was better than the Warrior Sage, so there was a small possibility that he would be able to eliminate the other party. Regardless of who won or lost, after such an earth-shattering battle, both of them would definitely be much weaker. That would be an advantage for me or Renly. Yep, the prerequisite was that both of us weren't heavily injured. In this aspect I still had some confidence. Let's hope Renly's lucky star continues to shine. As the thought flashed through his mind, the organizing committee member showed the first ball. Shangqing Sect Warrior Sage Chen Donglu. Following which he took out the second ball and announced loudly, Longhu Club Lu Qing. Lu Qing suddenly felt like laughing when he heard this result. Just like last year he had encountered the strongest one. However, there was a big difference. The warrior sage was not as strong as the Dragon King back then, and he was no longer an ignorant person. Almost instinctively he turned to look at warrior sage Chen Donglu, and saw him smiling in greeting. He had an elegant demeanor and the demeanor of a grandmaster. Luckily he's not a complete warrior sage. Lu Qing laughed to himself and nodded back. He felt his body relax as though he had been waiting for this for a long time. The semi-finals of Warrior Sage battle were thus decided. Warrior Sage Chen Donglu vs Sky Shaking Roar Lu Qing. Kirin Dong Bashin vs Morning Star Renly. After drawing lots, Lu Qing and the rest walked to the side and went down the stairs to the mixed interview area. What do you think of Warrior Sage? What do you think your chances of winning are? What do you think of Warrior Sage's performance in this competition? Microphones were handed to him one after another. Questions were thrown at him one after another, reminding Lu Qing of the same situation last year. The questions were mostly the same. He didn't give a specific answer. Instead he smiled and said, "A chef who doesn't want to be a general isn't a good driver." After finishing the interview with a similar attitude, he left and returned to the hotel. At this moment the reporters suddenly realized a problem. The new semi-finalist, Morning Star Renly, who lived up to her reputation as a heavenly son, hadn't come for an interview. In a quiet corner, the round-faced assistant was frantically making a call. "Hello Marshal Uncle, where are you?" "Now." Assistants weren't allowed in the lot drawing ceremony. Soon, Renly's serious voice came from the other end of the line. "I'm here." The wall is on the left, the wall is on the right, the road is in front, and the road is behind." The assistant was dumbfounded. Sitting in the SUV, Lu Qing took out his phone to check but didn't see any reply from Yanzhika. Entering her graduation period, she was so busy that she couldn't even attend to the competition in China at night and the competition in Connecticut in the morning. She even had to make time to check the results. Putting down his phone, Lu Qing looked out of the window. The lights were bright in the morning and the neon in the night. Suddenly, a special reminder sounded. He picked it up and saw that it was from Yanzhika. "Good luck." It was simple, just 2 words. It was as though he didn't forget to take a peek when he was in a hurry. Whenever he had the time he would press his phone. Beep. A few seconds later another message came. It was tight and urgent but also very simple. "I have high hopes for you." Lu Qing's lips curled. Chapter 735. May 19, 6 p.m. Lu Qing arrived at Jianghu Stadium early and entered his personal lounge. He didn't turn on the lights or the big screen TV, leaving the room in complete darkness. In this absolute darkness, he sat on the sofa and stared ahead, immersing himself in his own emotions. Before the big battle, he quietly recalled the emotions that had left a deep impression on him. He recalled the throbbing emotions that had supported him step by step to reach this point and made his final preparations. That was the love and care of his parents. That was the reluctance to see them haggard, tired, and in pain. That was the kinship that manifested in small things like stir-fried eels. That was the love that originated from the bottom of his heart, brewed in silence, blossomed in youth, and bore fruit. That was the uncontrollable confession and the "let me be happy for 5 minutes" of tonight's Yu Ming. That was the feeling of wanting to protect when he saw the girl curled up in his arms. That was the motivation of wanting to become better and to give her better. That was the satisfaction and responsibility of exchanging rings and promising each other a lifetime. That was the feeling of being comforted by "next time." That was the ecstasy of winning for the first time and winning the championship. That was the melancholy of bidding farewell to Songqing youth and friends. That was the unwillingness when facing a dark sect 9th pin and facing Gu Hui's sudden attack. He didn't want to let his loved ones suffer and suffer. That was the determination of breaking through the Jindan after thousands of twists and turns. That was the loneliness of being alone in the middle of the night. That was the unfulfilled heart of being separated for a long time. Scenes of the past flashed past, becoming clearer and clearer. They lingered and brewed, fermenting strength. May 19, 6:30 p.m., in the Physical Invulnerability restaurant affiliated to Jianghu Stadium. A table full of dishes was placed in front of Qian Donglu. The fragrance of the dishes wafted into his nose. He picked up his chopsticks, picked up the food and put it into his mouth leisurely and contented. He didn't show the slightest hint of nervousness and caution from the intense battle he was about to face in an hour. These noodles are really good. You guys can try. Qian Donglu smiled at Peng Liyun and the rest. His attitude seemed to be able to calm everyone around him and ease their anxiety. Looking at his calm expression, Peng Liyun couldn't help but sigh. Martial Uncle Qian had experienced countless finals, so the semi-finals were just a piece of cake for him. In this aspect, he was indeed better than Lu Qing, who hadn't even touched the finals. However, Martial Uncle Qian was not deliberately being leisurely. Instead, it was due to his lazy nature. Moreover, it coincided with the state of mind of the Shangqing sect's cultivation method. This could only be described with 4 words: Tao of nature. Qian Donglu gobbled down his food like a whirlwind. When it was almost 7, he put down his bowl and chopsticks, stood up slowly and smiled. It's time to get ready. After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the lounge. His white robe fluttered gently, and his black Taoist bun seemed to blend into his surroundings. May 19, 7 p.m. outside Jianghu Stadium. A few young girls with the childishness of a student got off the car and went straight to the door. On the way they saw a vendor selling light sticks. Thinking that they had only prepared a small trumpet and an inflatable hammer, it seemed that they were missing something, so they went over and after some bargaining each of them bought a light stick. They planned to use it when cheering later. After buying some other things, they found the entrance marked on their tickets and lined up at the back of the queue in an orderly manner. As they moved step by step, the girls excitedly discussed the upcoming competition. I think my hubby might win this time. What do you mean your hubby? He's obviously my hubby. I think so too. Lu Qing has an advantage in the competition. The warrior sage has encountered strong opponents consecutively. He's exhausted and injured. Yeah, that's what I saw from the analysis of the VIPs. I don't care about the analysis. I'm relying on my intuition. But I still feel that the war sage is not that easy to win. No matter the result, we have to give it our all. Otherwise, how can we cheer for my hubby? Looking at their half-nervous, half-excited, lively discussions and listening to their internet slang, someone at the back secretly shook their head and muttered, "This batch of fans can't make it?" As they chatted and laughed, the girls finally arrived at the security checkpoint. They found a box for storing light sticks. A security guard gestured for them to throw their items in. We can't bring these? We could bring them in the past. Why didn't you say so earlier? Those vendors outside definitely knew. They even sold them to us. How infuriating. Forget it. I'll just take it as accumulating good karma for Lu Qing. After some discussion, they didn't make a fuss. One by one, they threw the items they shouldn't bring into the box. After passing through the security checkpoint, they walked into the stadium and looked for their seats in an orderly manner. May 19, 7:30 p.m., in one of the VIP rooms in Jianghu Stadium. Geezer Sher happily pushed open the door and entered with a bottle of wine. He scanned the room and saw old friends like Queen of Thought, Fei Dan, Empty Nest Grandpa Wu Malian. Why are you only here now? Fei Dan shook her head in amusement. The competition hasn't started yet, right? What kind of master would stand in front of his disciple? Geezer Sher laughed and walked towards the empty seat. Warrior Sage has fought a few tough battles before this. I think my silly disciple might actually win tonight. Hey, if he really wins, I'll have to talk to Wu Guang, that old bull-nosed Wu Guang. I'll let him know how we felt when he kept mentioning Warrior Sage back then. Wu Malian was stunned for a moment and said in surprise, Jianghu, Geezer Sher, you actually got Wu Guang's Taoist name right. Comrade Sher Jianghu sat down slowly and smiled proudly. Wu Guang and I have been old friends for decades. I'm already used to his supernatural ability. Although we haven't met for a few years, I still remember his Taoist name very well. I'm strong, my realm is high, and my memory is good. You can't deny that. Unlike you, I didn't pay attention to that old ox nose for a few months and started calling him Wu Guang, Woolingdi, and Woolingdi. His words instantly attracted laughter. Even Queen of Thought, Fei Dan, was a little convulsed. In the circle of the older generation, joking about the 5 lights was a constant source of amusement. In such a scene, the relatively calm reaction of the physical invulnerability expert beside Geezer Sher was rather unusual. He immediately caught Gizershir's attention. He turned his head and looked at the unfamiliar yet slightly familiar face. He subconsciously blurted out, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry." "And this is?" Everyone went silent. The physical invulnerability expert who was asked sighed and replied faintly, "I'm Wu Guang." May 19, 7:40 p.m., Jianghu Stadium's reporters' seats. Some people were busy communicating with the backline and the organizing committee to adjust the live broadcast image bit by bit. Some people were wearing bulletproof vests, armor and helmets. They slipped below and approached the safety barrier. They set up their heavily guarded cameras and aimed them at the arena. This was a supplement to the aerial and orbital filming. In addition, some people were posing and commenting before the match. Some people were also writing on paper. "What are you doing?" A cameraman asked the latter curiously. Xu Rui smiled and said, "I'm thinking about the interview questions." She didn't have an interview today, but she had made up her mind. As long as Lu Qing broke through his bottleneck and got the best results, she would shamelessly ask him to accept another interview. The questions written on the paper were exactly what she wanted to ask during the interview. For example, why do you want the nickname, God King? Don't you have any feelings after using sky-shaking roar for so long? In private, other than Qing, what other nicknames do you have? Who do you want to thank the most? Are there any heartwarming or interesting stories you want to share with us? After some idle chatter, someone suddenly shouted, "Get ready, get ready." Hence, most people turned their attention back to the arena. In the live broadcast studio, the host said with a straight face, "Everyone get ready. The competition is about to begin. It's about to begin." On the live broadcast platform, guest commentator He Xiaowei suddenly straightened his back. "Let's start the countdown." In a certain live broadcast channel, Kai Zhongming also coughed twice. May 19, 7:45 p.m., Jianghu Stadium's exclusive resting room. Lu Qing came back to his senses and his eyes suddenly became deep. He stood up and walked towards the door. Every step he took seemed to be filled with strength. Just as he was about to reach the door, his phone suddenly rang. He took it out and saw a message from Yanjika. She sent an emoji with fists shining. "I'm with you." A smile appeared on Lu Cheng's face as he replied with a fighting emoji. Then he locked the screen and looked ahead calmly. A few seconds later he stepped out and pulled open the door with force. Clang. Light surged in from outside the door and shone into the darkness. P.S. Don't forget I have acupuncture tomorrow morning. Yes, you can watch the video congratulating Yuewen's listing. In it, you can see that I haven't recovered from my facial paralysis. However, that was taken on October 20th. Now I'm much better. Chapter 736. Out of the main entrance, Lu Qing followed the path of glory. With the tens of thousands of spectators in different attire and their loud cheers in the background, he entered the arena without any distractions and walked step by step to his designated spot. At this moment, warrior sage Chen Donglu was strolling in from the opposite exit. Dressed in a white robe, his Taoist hairstyle was simple and unadorned. There were no changes in the weather. There were no dark clouds, low air pressure, or thunder. For a moment, Lu Qing felt that warrior sage was looking down on him. He recalled his battle with Dragon King. Both parties had tried to gain the upper hand by showing off their strength, resulting in heavy clouds, reverberations, and leaps of silvery light. Heat, hazy clouds, and crimson light. It was nothing like the calm and natural scene now. Natural. Just as these two words appeared in his mind, he suddenly felt as though every step the warrior sage took was stepping on his heart. Thump, thump, thump. Lu Qing's qi and blood started to fluctuate. His heart was in a mess and his vision gradually blurred. He saw layers of dark clouds and silvery white electric snakes shuttling through them. He saw that the surrounding area had turned into a desolate Gobi. In that instant he couldn't differentiate between reality and illusion, even with the enemy heart-freezing move and the advanced god above head. He felt as though he had turned into a poplar tree that had lived for hundreds or thousands of years, facing the gathering lightning above his head amidst the coldness. The might of the divine punishment of righteousness, Yang, and Yang grew more and more obvious and terrifying. It made one tremble in fear and find it difficult to resist. In such a scene he was the only one in the world. Without help he felt extremely lonely, panicked and helpless. Lu Qing had experienced a similar experience when he faced the living Buddha Shi Shan. However, one of them was an illusory land of pure land that showcased the grandeur of Buddha, while the other was a scene of thunder punishment that showcased the majesty of heaven. This meant that warrior sage Chen Donglu was no weaker than the living Buddha in terms of mental strength. In fact, he might even be stronger. Warrior Sage is a little closer to the forbidden zone. Lu Qing didn't dare delay. He took a deep breath, turned his mental strength and unique path into intent, and extended them outwards. His surroundings immediately turned dark, as though it had absorbed all the light around him. In this darkness, there were specks of dazzling light like diamonds, but their existence didn't bring light. Instead, with their sparseness and insignificance, they set off the profundity, darkness, and boundlessness of the environment. Lu Qing was the only living being here, and when he raised his head and looked around, he felt boundless, lonely, and frustrated. Within the indescribable emptiness, the might of heavenly punishment was diluted and diluted. No matter how dignified it was unable to disperse this eternally unchanging boundlessness and desolation. Bzzzt bzzzt bzzzt. The sound of electric current from another galaxy entered his ears. Lu Qing finally saw the warrior sage again. He saw him leisurely walking amidst countless lightning bolts. He saw him stop at a predetermined spot and gently nodded his head in approval. Bye. No, it had already started when they were still in the exclusive resting room, or even when they had drawn each other's lot. This was a real fight between experts. The audience also felt this atmosphere. Their cheers and cheers unknowingly stopped, and the atmosphere was tense and oppressive. In a VIP room, Jianghu was silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a dry laugh and said to the physical invulnerability expert beside him, "Haha, it's been 5 years, right? You've aged a lot and changed a lot. I didn't recognize you the first time I saw you. That's why I thought you looked familiar. Yeah, this old man isn't affected by supernatural ability. It's just that Taoist Wuguang's appearance has changed a lot. Plus, we haven't seen each other in a long time, so I didn't recognize him." Even Jianghu believed his own words. Taoist Wuguang looked up at him and sighed. "You didn't tell me about your birthday celebration." Jianghu turned into a clay puppet. "Let the conversation begin." The referee's voice came from afar. It was like a wisp of smoke rising in the vast and empty universe. Qian Donglu didn't say a word. He looked down at his opponent. Lu Qing knew that it wasn't that the warrior sage wasn't good with words, nor was it that he wasn't good at engaging in a battle of the mind with just a few words. There was only one reason why he didn't speak, and that was because he was lazy. He couldn't be bothered to speak, and he couldn't be bothered to waste his time. Lu Qing kept his silence as well. The strength he had fermented earlier flowed slowly in his heart. This time he didn't form the 5 flames in advance. He wanted to keep his mind and body calm to deal with the opening storm. Seconds and minutes ticked by. The referee in his insulating suit stood on the line. He raised his right hand and swung it down. "Begin." Before he finished speaking, a silver flash appeared before Lu Qing's eyes. The warrior sage, Qian Donglu, had closed the distance between them like a flash of lightning. Behind him, the airflow condensed into cones and droplets that looked like expanding white mist. However, Lu Qing, who was overlooking everything and sensing the subtle changes in heaven and earth, sensed it ahead of time. Like a giant magnet tied to his opponent, he moved according to the situation. When Qian Donglu approached, he moved to the side, giving off a strange feeling that they would never meet again. While dodging horizontally, Lu Qing's right leg muscles swelled. With a bang, he threw a side kick to the spot where he originally stood. It was just right. But as soon as he moved his knee, Qian Donglu straightened his back and turned his accumulated strength into inertia. He didn't stop at Lu Qing's previous position, like a slag truck that couldn't stop its momentum and couldn't stop. Boom. Only then did the sound of him breaking through the air reach Lu Qing's ears. The terrifying sonic boom chased after his figure and expanded rapidly. It turned into a solid iron wind that slapped at Lu Qing. Qian Donglu's swift thunder was comparable to Dong Baxian's transient steps. It was much faster than the speed of sound. His spirit was stronger than living Buddha's, and his speed was only slightly slower than Kirin's. This was why the warrior sage was called the warrior sage. This was a martial arts genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years. He could quickly master any martial arts and surpass others. He had almost no shortcomings and could be considered strong in any aspect. Fighting with him would really make people feel despair. It would really make people feel like they couldn't fight against him. Thump. After Qian Donglu rushed past where Lu Qing had been standing, his body tensed up. He took a big step forward, turned his back and whipped out his left leg. Bam. He whipped his leg horizontally and drew out a bright silver blade. The blade split apart the shockwave created by the sonic boom and slashed at Lu Qing, who was retreating due to the latter. As he retreated, Lu Qing pointed with his right index finger and shot out a ray of crystal-clear ice spirit holy light. With a whoosh, the cold light landed on the silver blade and disintegrated it along with Qian Donglu's body. At this moment, Qian Donglu had already turned around. Instead of using the supersonic footwork, which was a huge burden on his body, he strode forward and chased after Lu Qing. With every step he took, his body grew bigger and stronger. His muscles quickly tightened and propped up his clothes. The places that were exposed even had purple, green, or silver lightning patterns. The purple seal in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. Thump, thump, thump. With every step Qian Donglu took, the sky darkened. Dark clouds gathered and lightning accumulated. It was as though a heavenly punishment would descend at any moment. This was no longer an illusion. It was unusually real. His body and mind resonated with the heavens and earth. In this environment where the sharp sword was hanging high above his head, and where the natural lightning was definitely faster than his evasive maneuvers, Lu Qing let go of his control over his premonition. Suddenly he activated the attainment formula, stimulated his body and flew backward. Just as he moved, the lightning struck vertically. Bam, bam, bam. They rose and fell one after another, forming a horizontal silvery white line. However, because Lu Qing had dodged in advance, the silvery white line always brushed past him in a hurry. Just as the lightning behind and to his left and right were about to erupt and bombard him, he suddenly paused. Light blue spurted out from his back and shot towards Qian Donglu like a rocket. Bam! He rushed past the area where the lightning had already fallen and the power of the lightning was thin. Amidst the slight numbness that didn't affect him, he ran towards the warrior sage who was striding towards him. As he advanced and retreated, he defused the threat of the lightning forest, purple seal of the celestial master. Bam! Halfway through, Lu Qing strangely retracted his qi and blood and stopped. In his lower abdomen, a miniature universe rapidly formed. Bright stars moved and outlined a huge fighting art. Bam! His body expanded and his muscles bulged. Like an ancient giant, he took a heavy step forward and raised his arm towards the warrior sage who was already near him. Chapter 737. Clang. The arena shook violently as Lu Qing and the warrior sage stepped forward. It was as though a plane was attempting supersonic flight at low altitude. Immediately after, the ancient giants collided. One of them had a lightning tattoo and was surrounded by purple electricity, while the other had bulging muscles and explosive strength. Bam! With a loud boom, Lu Qing took 2 steps back. Tiny electric arcs jumped from his right fist and spread to his entire body, causing his hair to stand on end. Qian Donglu also took a few steps back. His arm was visibly shaking from the impact of the terrifying power. The numbness quickly deepened. Lu Qing immediately retracted his qi and blood, using force concentration to alleviate the negative effects and stabilizing his body. But at this moment, his body was pulled by an invisible force and he couldn't help but stagger. His force concentration was disintegrated as soon as it was formed, and he couldn't fully dispel the numbness. Between him and the warrior sage Qian Donglu, it was as though a mysterious rope was pulling at him. Once the distance between them widened, the rope tightened and pulled back. Under this pull, Qian Donglu was already leaning towards him. He lowered his shoulders slightly as though he could move mountains and crush alloys. Bam! Lu Qing threw a left punch with the explosive force of his incomplete dance stage, hitting his opponent's shoulder. His waist swayed backwards and he took a step back to mitigate the force. This time he didn't hastily use force concentration. Instead, he instantly formed a layer of crystal-clear ice around his body to isolate the electric charge and cut off the invisible suction force. As the ice wall formed, Lu Qing's pupils suddenly shrank. Qian Donglu had lowered his waist and didn't give chase or pull at the rope. He raised his hands and suddenly clapped them together, as if he was slapping something, giving people the feeling that he was lifting something heavy with ease. Not good. Lu Qing didn't have time to do anything else. He could only use the most basic method to pull at his spine and pounce to the side. Boom! A thunderous roar reverberated in Lu Qing's heart, shattering his ice heart. His mind was sluggish, and he could only rely on inertia to maintain his body's movements. Fortunately, he had the enemy heart-freezing move to block it, so he wasn't completely stunned. He immediately visualized the forwarding character and suppressed the remaining waves. Bzzz. Qian Donglu opened his palms and pulled out a purple lightning blade as thin as a cicada's wing. As soon as it appeared, it struck Lu Cheng's body, ignoring the distance between them. The 8th move of the Thunder Sect. Thunder from a clear sky, cloudless thunder saber. Sizzle. Although Lu Cheng tried to dodge, he couldn't completely avoid it. The ice layer on his right rib shattered and a charred crack appeared. Purple electric arcs and strong paralysis were drilling deep into it. If he hadn't congealed the ice wall in advance, his whole body would have been paralyzed and he would have fallen to the ground. Moreover, the wound would have exposed his internal organs. Even so, half of his body was still numb, landing unsteadily. He staggered, feeling a bit uneasy. At this moment, Qian Donglu extended his body. Dark clouds immediately piled up in the air, and lightning snakes leaped about. Streaks of silvery white light streaked across the sky, setting off his tall and mighty figure. He was like the god of thunder, punishing on behalf of the heavens. Standing there, he gave off the feeling that this was how it should be. Zzzzzzzzzzzzz. Countless bolts of lightning gathered in his palm, seemingly transforming into a spear of execution. Bam! Looking down on Lu Cheng, Qian Donglu swung his right fist in the form of a punishing spear. The irresistible pressure weighed down on Lu Cheng's heart, causing it to beat wildly. Panic, fear, dread, and despair. This move was similar to the god-slaying saber's eternal silence. It was a transformation similar to the Forbidden Zone, a perfect blend of punches and kicks striking both the body and the mind. This was the second move of the Thunder Sect, punishment on behalf of the heavens. This was its most brilliant and most extreme performance because its user was the warrior sage Qian Donglu. Lu Qing, who had just stabilized himself, felt a surge of negative emotions and a strong sense of danger. But this time he wasn't able to rely on his premonition to grasp the strongest point of Qian Donglu's attack, because there were several places. The premonition that he relied on to avoid danger was disrupted. Although it didn't disappear or get blocked, it wasn't accurate enough. This was the move of the warrior sage. With a change of mind, Lu Qing didn't use force concentration or the complete 9 words formula to break free from the mental suppression of his opponent. Instead, he unleashed the power and fermented emotions hidden deep in his heart. Similar desperate situations always felt familiar to him. They always filled him with unwillingness to fall into a deep slumber, unwilling to part with his parents, cuckoo, forever. That was the strong desire to live on. Grasping this desire, Lu Qing seemed to have returned to the state he was in when he met with the 9th pin of the Dark Sect and the cultivator Gu Hui. His body was clear both inside and outside. His strength, ice, fire, spirit, and premonition were all mixed together, gushing out. With a shake of his arm, his fist struck out with a rumbling boom. With the premonition of danger as the helm and the desire to live as the driving force, it met the spear of divine punishment. His fist trembled slightly, shuttling back and forth in the lightning forest, where it was hard to distinguish between reality and illusion, as though he was playing Thunder Fighter. The Cosmic Universe Sect, his self-created unique skill, life. Bam! The darkness retreated, the lightning dissipated, and all illusions parted. Lu Cheng's fist accurately blocked Qian Donglu's right fist. Their muscles, tendons, and bones were deformed to varying degrees, presenting a picture of strength. Bzzz. The lightning spear broke through the remaining ice crystals, numbing Lu Cheng's left arm completely, temporarily losing all feeling. Qian Donglu, on the other hand, was hit by the ice and fire. The capillaries on his fist ruptured, covered in white frost. In a head-on clash, Lu Qing was clearly inferior, even if his opponent was the warrior sage with 70% of his HP. Bam! With a sidestep, he stirred up the wind and snow. Dodging to the side, he finally put some distance between himself and Qian Donglu with the help of force concentration. With a release of force, the numbness subsided, and his left arm barely recovered. Following which, he used the wind and snow to cover his tracks and approached Qian Donglu, initiating the fight. Logically speaking, the best way to fight the warrior sage, who was at 70% of his HP, would be to move around and slowly wear him down, avoiding his attacks and attacking his weak points. However, Lu Qing believed that this would only lead to a miserable defeat. Not to mention the warrior sage's supersonic lightning-quick footwork, just allowing him to unleash his full strength and build up his momentum without resistance was a very dangerous move. Once an expert at the peak of physical invulnerability like him got used to fighting and built up his momentum, he would be unstoppable. He could even put up a fight against an expert from the Forbidden Zone. His spirit could temporarily overcome the weakness of his physical body. Therefore, Lu Cheng's goal was to wear him down, but he was going tit for tat with his opponent. He was trying to interrupt Qian Donglu's build-up and prevent him from feeling satisfied. Bam! Amidst the howling wind and the falling snow, Lu Qing flashed to Qian Donglu's side. Facing his enemy from the side, he bent his elbow and struck. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. He punched and kicked using fire-like invasion. Every move was covered in purple flames and filled with heat. Together with his opponent's silver white, green or bright purple lightning, they painted a strange scene. Sparks flew and electric arcs danced. After 19 moves, Lu Qing put his elbow in front of his chest. Combining all the strength in his body, he swung his arm forward as though he was thrusting a spear. This time, his fist was no longer covered with Emperor Yen force. After 19 moves, the imbalance in his body had worsened, and the ice spirit had accumulated by itself. Relying on the uniqueness that was difficult to achieve in orthodox martial arts, he had reached the standard of a big move. Lament of the Ice Queen. Both parties were in a close-range brawl. Faced with such a punch, Qian Donglu seemed to have no way of dodging. He could only take it head-on. Let's see if the ice coffin could seal him longer or if the thunder and lightning could break through it faster. At this moment he slowly and leisurely punched out with his left fist. Bzzzt bzzzt bzzzt. The tiny lightning snakes leaping around returned and gathered together. Then they transformed into a black lightning in the shape of a ping-pong ball. That works? Lu Qing's pupils contracted, but he couldn't stop his momentum. The warrior sage could actually execute the 9th move of the Thunder Sect, Yin-Yang Reversal, Devourer of Dark Destruction. Compared to before, his realm had increased again. Or rather, he hadn't had the opportunity to use it in his previous matches. After all, he was the only physical invulnerability expert of the cosmic universe style. Poof! Lu Qing's fist was blocked by the black lightning ball. The accumulated lament of the Ice Queen was like a flood that fell into the sea, unable to create any ripples. However, the black lightning ball didn't explode. Instead, it gradually dimmed and disappeared as though it had been frozen. In such a collision, Lu Qing's body froze. For a moment, he felt as though his spirit was being devoured. Suddenly, he saw the warrior sage retract his hands. His palms were about to close and strike again. Lu Qing didn't think too much about it. Fire force erupted from the soles of his feet. Pale blue flames spurted out as he flew backwards. Qian Donglu's palms stopped in midair, facing each other. Between his palms, countless thunderbolts were born and extinguished and reborn. An extremely terrifying mental force suddenly locked onto Lu Qing, causing him to abruptly stop flying. He felt as if the world around him had been isolated, boundless and desolate. All that was left was the thunderstorm that was about to destroy everything and bring an end to everything. Restriction Sect, Shangqing Chapter. All living things die. Chapter 738. For a moment the area around Lu Qing was as dark as the clouds. The sky was small and the ground was narrow. There was nowhere to hide. Countless lightning bolts were about to erupt and cover the entire area. This was both an illusion and reality. Accompanying all of this was the hands of the warrior sage Qian Donglu, the hands that reaped victory. Lu Qing, who had just stopped flying, knew that using the complete 9 words formula could only break through the mental suppression and prevent him from being affected by most of the illusions. However, he would have to defend against the real lightning bolts and attacks with his fists and feet. That would be very dangerous. In a flash, he restrained his instinctive reaction and sought strength from the emotions brewing in his heart. His parents' less haggard faces and Yenjika's pure and peaceful expression as she slept appeared in his mind. The throbbing desire to protect and hold on filled his heart. At this moment he straightened his back like a man. With his parents and wife behind him, how could he retreat? He had to face the difficulties and do what he knew was impossible. Some things were more important than living. Bam! Lu Qing took half a step forward, his willpower erupting like a volcano and as firm as metal. The darkness around him faded away, and the isolated area returned to nature. As their minds clashed, his subtle premonition grasped the source of the danger. His right arm made a pulling motion. Boom! Bolts of lightning flashed, illuminating the entire arena. The lightning bolts swept across the sky, with the warrior sage's hands hidden as the strongest point. Bam! In the instant before the lightning bolts erupted, Lu Qing punched out his right fist. The faint purple light in front of him expanded rapidly, forming a thick layer of ice on the surface of his body. In the past year, his attainments in the Cosmic Universe sect had deepened. He could now do things that he couldn't before. For example, with one punch he could separate ice and fire, combining attack and defense into one. Combined with the willpower, feelings, and emotions that had run through his entire martial arts career, it was a killer move that he had created himself. Cosmic Universe style, Guardian. Boom. Amidst the earthquake-like shaking and crackling sounds, Lu Cheng's body was covered in silver snakes, shattering the layer of ice. In front of his fist, flames turned into clouds and expanded, blocking Chen Donglu's purple thunder seal. Thump, thump, thump. Having lost the upper hand, Lu Cheng, whose body was somewhat numb, was bounced back. His footsteps were slightly messy. In that instant, he recalled the time when he had used tilting northwest, sinking southeast, to cause Lu Yongyuan to react in a similar manner. Then he had used a series of terrifying attacks to take away his opponent. He had a deep understanding of his current situation. However, just as he was about to detonate the fire force in his body and move to the side in a strange manner, a figure appeared in front of him in a flash and crashed into him at a speed faster than the speed of sound. The warrior sage's lightning strikes before the ears, bang. Lu Cheng crossed his arms in front of his body to block the attack. He was pushed backwards by the overwhelming force. Crack. Several bones in his chest were broken, so he quickly gave up on stabilizing his body and flew backwards. Otherwise, both of his arms would have been fractured. Then there was no way to fight. Rumble. The cloud of the sonic boom expanded, and the violent wind made Chen Donglu's white robe dance in the wind. He looked inexplicably lofty. Relying on his strength, his figure fluttered as he chased after Lu Cheng. He took a step forward and clapped his palms together. Rumble. A thunderclap pierced through the remnants of the explosion, causing Lu Cheng's mind to buzz for a moment. His ice heart shattered once again. The second and third section changes he had prepared deflated naturally, as if a car tire had been ruthlessly pierced by a steel nail. Thump. He landed on the ground and hurriedly leaned back. A thin purple thunder saber slashed between his chest and abdomen, almost extending to his throat and head. With a sizzling sound, a deep wound appeared in front of Lu Cheng. Crimson blood didn't flow out, only signs of charred flesh. His whole body went numb, and only after a moment of rest did he have the strength to concentrate his abdomen. At this time, Chen Donglu had already caught up. His left leg tightened, surrounded by silvery light, and he lashed out with a series of attacks. Bam, 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 bam. In such a precarious situation, Lu Cheng felt as though he had returned to the semifinals of the Supreme Class battle. At that time, he had encountered a warrior sage who was in a much better physical condition than today. At first he could still attack and defend, but very soon he fell into a similar situation. Under wave after wave of combos, he could not hold on for long and was defeated miserably. Was he going to repeat the same story today? The thought flashed through his mind. Lu Cheng gritted his teeth and blocked with a heart that was a mixture of survival and protection. He didn't panic. Bam, 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 crackle. Lu Cheng's ice heart was activated again. His god shone and his sharp senses detected this. Now is the time. He stopped using ice spirit and allowed the Emperor Yen force in his body to surge out of his fists. Chen Donglu's expression didn't change. Holding the initiative, he dodged to the side and struck with his palms again. Lu Cheng's body shook. Before he could swing his fist, the purple flame had already dissipated. It was like a dud that could only burn the air and the ground. Bam. Lu Cheng had already dodged the cloudless thunder blade in advance, but Chen Donglu launched another attack. Nine Heavens Ensemble, Lightning Tribulation. Bam, 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 bam. Because of this, Lu Cheng, who had lost his accurate judgment of time, could hold on bitterly under round after round of crazy attacks. Although he was in a sorry state, he didn't show any signs of defeat. However, Chen Donglu's attacks seemed endless. Lu Cheng's numbness accumulated and his injuries worsened. Bam. Finally, after 2 punches, Lu Cheng's muscles and tendons trembled violently. He couldn't help but stagger back. His mind went blank and he temporarily lost the ability to retaliate. He knew that if the warrior sage took this opportunity to attack, he could only resign himself to his fate and accept his defeat. However, the expected attack didn't appear. Lu Cheng recovered and saw the white-robed Chen Donglu doing force concentration. Had his combo finally come to an end? Had he finally exceeded the limit of the freezing? Had the hidden injuries from the previous few intense battles finally shown? Here's my chance. Without hesitation, Lu Cheng followed up with force concentration. He withdrew his qi, blood, force, numbness, trembling and other sensations into his dantian. Moving his stars, he outlined 9 ancient words. confrontation, army, fighting, swordsman, wholeness, formation, deference, forwarding, attainment, bam. He pushed out both palms towards Chen Donglu, who had already launched an electric punch. His mental strength surged and his willpower penetrated. Suddenly Chen Donglu felt a little dizzy. He felt as if darkness had descended around him, so deep that it seemed to have no end. The bone-chilling sensation was both cold and lonely. This was Lu Cheng's concept of the universe. Loneliness, frustration, coldness, and pain flooded Chen Donglu's mind. Even though he was the warrior sage, he had tasted similar emotions before. He couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. His punches slowed down. Lu Cheng took advantage of this short delay and arched his back. He dodged the attack and prepared himself. In the dark and boundless universe, stars rose one after another, each emitting a pure white light. They rushed towards Chen Donglu from all directions. The illusory coldness materialized, sealing the warrior sage's body in ice. This was his self-created killer move, Universe Phantom, which was infused with mental strength. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. One by one the eternal stars charged towards the warrior sage, with tails of flames behind them. Chen Donglu narrowed his eyes. Silver white, pure green, and bright purple lightning leaped from his body. They shattered the ice and struck the fireball. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions rang out, shaking the earth and mountains. Chen Donglu forcibly blocked the killer move. However, his face was pale and his qi and blood were waning. At this moment, Lu Qing straightened his back and took half a step forward. He raised his arm and clenched his fist, forming a dazzling darkness. Tilting northwest, sinking southeast. Bam. He flipped and fell, calming the remaining lightning, flames, and wind. It was as if they were suppressed or destroyed. Chen Donglu took a deep breath. His body suddenly expanded, transforming into a thunder giant. Under the ancient and abstruse thunder seal patterns, he threw a punch forward. Boom. Amidst the explosion he swung his arm back and retreated. Every step he took left deep footprints, as though he was trying to dissipate the force that was difficult to resolve. Lu Qing gathered his Dan force and drew the fighting formula. He strode forward and punched down. Bam, bam, bam. He used the Dan force explosion and the complete fighting formula 3 times consecutively. The violent and terrifying force left Chen Donglu wobbling, bleeding from his mouth and nose. However, the other party still managed to hold on, relying on all kinds of exquisite and extraordinary methods to hold on. Lu Cheng's momentum slowed. He had no choice but to stop his killer moves and switch to normal punches and kicks. He launched a barrage of attacks to suppress the warrior sage and prevent him from pulling away. In this kind of attack, he punched with ice spirit and slowly condensed white, faint purple, and other fireballs around him. He was accumulating the 9 rotations of 5 flames, just like the fire sect physical invulnerability experts except for Dragon King. Chen Donglu tried his best to break free. Lightning danced wildly and spread across the ground, but to no avail. When the 5 flames were formed, Lu Qing leaped forward, and the fireballs around him quickly converged into one. At this moment, lightning flashed across Chen Donglu's body, forming a stark contrast with the lightning snakes slithering on the ground. He floated up half an inch as though he was repelled by the ground. Then he slid back with almost no friction, narrowly avoiding Lu Cheng's punch. Even in a passive situation, the warrior sage still had the foresight to make such a move. Shocked, Lu Qing hurriedly stabilized the 5 flames to prevent them from converging. He didn't want to waste his ultimate move. Suddenly his eyes narrowed. He saw Chen Donglu's abdomen squirming as he retreated. He opened his throat and let out a thunderous roar that shook the 3 realms. He didn't have the energy to use thunder from a clear sky. Cloudless thunder blade while floating backward, but he could use other methods to disrupt his opponent. Boom. Lu Cheng's mind shook. His ice heart cracked and the 5 flames around him were about to go out of control. At the critical moment he stabilized his ice heart and regained the balance of the 5 flames with his absolute control. This wasn't the Tao of ice and fire, but a technique from the 9 rotations of 5 flames. Descent of the sun itself. In that instant, Lu Qing recalled the Dragon King's advice. When he was proud of his cosmic universe style and could easily use the 9 rotations of 5 flames, the Dragon King had specifically said, use this time to practice the 9 rotations of 5 flames again. You're relying on cultivation techniques to omit the complicated control techniques in the 9 rotations of 5 flames. These things won't help you use the 9 rotations of 5 flames better, but they can improve your control of the various flames. These are the basics. Some shortcuts can be taken but some things can't be saved. The scene flashed. Lu Qing secretly circulated his qi and blood to stimulate his body. He used the simplified attainment formula and pounced. Leaving behind afterimages, he caught up to the exhausted warrior sage Qian Donglu. Bam! He clenched his right fist and punched. Golden, faint purple and light blue fireballs converged into one. Qian Donglu's expression changed slightly. His body contorted as he threw a punch out of thin air. Rumble. A blinding white light, like the arrival of the great sun, shone on the sunglasses. The arena shook violently and a mushroom cloud rose. As the flames and shockwaves swept across, Lu Qing, who had retreated a few steps, straightened his back, formed a layer of ice and dashed towards Qian Donglu. Bam bam bam. Enduring the damage, he approached. He saw the warrior sage, who was in a weakened state for a brief moment. If he waited for the power of descent of the great sun to pass before launching his attack, the warrior sage would most likely be able to recover and hold on for a while longer. At that time, it would be hard to tell who would emerge victorious. Lu Qing clenched his teeth and reached out with his left hand to grab Qian Donglu's arm. However, the moment he made contact, he realized that Qian Donglu was like a nimble snake. However, this was Lu Qing's attempt at controlling the warrior sage's remaining strength. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he paused his left hand and stomped on the ground. His entire body turned sideways and rammed forward like a cannonball. Bam! With Qian Donglu wide open, Lu Qing pressed his shoulder against Qian Donglu's chest. With a snap of his right elbow, Lu Qing swung his arm downwards, stopping right in front of Qian Donglu's vitals. Silence fell and the waves began to subside. Through his sunglasses, the referee saw the frozen scene from afar. He quickly raised his right hand and shouted, "Lu Qing wins." P.S. 4,000 words chapter. Chapter 739. Lu Qing wins? As the wind blew and the clouds drifted, the frozen scene finally changed. Lu Qing stood up straight, raised his arms and saluted. "Thank you for the match." It was just a simple gesture, but it caused pain in his chest. His senses returned and he heaved a sigh of relief. Gradually he felt overjoyed. Other than the tag team battles and the professional matches, this was the first time he had defeated the warrior sage in a one-on-one battle, even if it was a 70% warrior sage. Compared to the situation during the Battle of Supreme Grades a year ago, although the other party's physical condition was worse, he could clearly feel his own improvement. That was what made him the happiest. Qian Donglu took a deep breath, and his expression softened. He shook his tattered white robe, took a deep look at Lu Qing, shook his head and sighed. "You looked like Qin Chitao when you charged through the explosion just now." After that, he turned around and walked slowly to the corresponding exit. Lu Qing was stunned. He couldn't help but criticize in his mind. "Usually people compare you to me. What do you mean when you say I look like the Dragon King? Who do I look more like? Why does it feel like I'm a product of the different characteristics of the Dragon King and the Warrior Sage?" That's a weird sentence. The joy of defeating the #1 physical invulnerability expert in the world made Lu Qing relax. All kinds of strange thoughts popped up one after another. At this moment, the live audience finally reacted. They cheered in amazement, "Lu Qing." Retracting his thoughts, Lu Qing endured the pain and waved. In his fan forum, Nye Chi said with a shocked expression, "This doesn't make sense. How did he win?" Unparalleled Dragon King replied with a funny expression, "Why can't he win? Lu Qing is at least a superclass and the gap between him and the warrior sage isn't that big. The warrior sage has been fighting hard all this while, and he even got hit by Lu Yongyuan. It's good enough that he's at 70% of his peak condition." As for Lu Qing, he only encountered 2 strong opponents. The battle with Living Buddha was a mental injury. Based on the data, he should have recovered from this long ago. Therefore, the battle with the long dike that protects the sea drained him a little, but his injuries weren't that serious. Today he's about 80 to 90% of himself. Given this, it's not impossible for him to win against the warrior sage, even though it's difficult. I mean, how did Lu Qing become a superclass? That's too fast. I feel like I'm in a dream. Peng Liyun and Ren Li are only at the first pin level. Nye Chi expressed her astonishment incoherently. A plumber eating mushrooms said, "Didn't the interviews and reports mention that Lu Qing is a future grandmaster? He blended other sects and created the cosmic universe style. He just made the great leap and became a physical invulnerability expert, which is a level higher than Peng Liyun and Ren Li's starting point. Plus, he didn't slack off and was constantly beaten by the Dragon King. It's normal for him to be half a step ahead of them. Look at the Wisdom King. He became a superclass in a little over 2 years and got a title in less than 3 years. Lu Qing has so many conditions which is almost unprecedented. It's natural for him to become a superclass half a year earlier than him. Plus, Lu Qing had the reputation of being a superclass on the spot last year. Invincible Punch explained. Eternal Nightfall, Yen Xiaoling said, clenching fist glows expression. What's the point of saying so much? I can't be bothered to listen to your analysis. Anyway, Senior won. He won. Ha ha ha, he beat the warrior sage in the title battle. Yeah, Little Nightfall is right. His existence is reasonable. Now we can say that our idol is the leader of the 4 heavenly sons. Nodding solemnly expression. Don't be happy too early. Let's wait until Lu Qing gets a title in the following year. Otherwise he still can't beat the Wisdom King. Let's accumulate some good karma. Wonton Seller said. Yeah, he hasn't even gotten the right to challenge. I think Lu Qing is seriously injured today. He might not be able to beat Dong Baxin next time, Unparalleled Dragon King said objectively. In the live broadcast studio, the guest commentator He Xiaowei laughed and said, I knew it. Lu Qing will definitely be one of the leading figures of the era after the legendary twins. He'll definitely be one of the 2 or 3 brightest ones. Phew, in less than 2 years as a physical invulnerability expert, he defeated the warrior sage directly and entered the final stage to fight for the right to challenge. Since the beginning of the title battle, he's ranked 2nd. The host echoed in shock and amazement. As for the first place, it was of course the record holder, Chen Donglu. Wherever there was a good record, his name would be there. Sometimes he would even occupy a few spots in the top 10. For example, in less than 2 years as a physical invulnerability expert, he not only entered the final stage to fight for the right to challenge, he also entered the final stage and won 2 titles. He Xiaowei said happily, although the warrior sage wasn't at his peak today, to be able to defeat him is enough to prove Lu Qing's standard and level. So here comes the question. What will be the first title Lu Qing will win? When will it be? You're welcome to guess on my Weibo. When the result is out, I'll reward the correct one handsomely. You're putting up a small advertisement. The host scolded jokingly. Xiaowei, don't be too confident. Let's not talk about whether Lu Qing can repel your poison healer. Just the uncertainty of the challenge tournament itself makes it hard to say whether he can win a title in the following year. Think about it. Unless you have unrivaled strength like the warrior sage or the dragon king, the title battle still depends on luck. Especially for superclass fighters like Lu Qing. If you really want to win the final battle, you can't do without the right time, place and people. Look, even the unrivaled warrior sage couldn't resist Black Hand this time. Facing strong opponents and tough battles all the way, he was finally stopped by Lu Qing. Of course, relatively speaking, as long as his luck isn't that bad, the right to challenge will still be in his bag. He Xiaowei rubbed his bald chin and said, that's right. That's why I don't think Lu Qing will win the right to challenge and win a title this time. He still lacks the right time, place and people, and his luck is still lacking. Unless he draws Renli today. It's a pity that time can't be turned back. Yeah, Lu Qing was pretty badly injured in the previous battle. Kirin Dong Baxin shouldn't have any problems fighting Renli. When it comes to the finals, the difference will be very obvious. I feel like you've poisoned Dong Baxin. The host gasped. My confidence is shaken. I'm just saying it out of habit. He Xiaowei laughed dryly and changed the topic. I just looked through the information. Lu Qing is the youngest physical invulnerability expert to defeat the warrior sage in a one-on-one battle. I have a feeling that the era of the scepter legacy is changing. The legendary twins are about to come to an end. In the next 10 or 15 years, will it be a scene of heroes vying for supremacy and gods rising together? Or will it be a scene of someone dominating a generation and dominating the world? But no matter what, Lu Qing's name is destined to shine. Perhaps in the future he will really get a nickname he likes and become the king of the age of Pantheon. Xiaowei, your eloquence is getting better and better. You're making my blood boil, said the host, half smiling and half indignant. In a well-known commentary room, the bullet screen was flooding in. Why aren't you saying anything? Why are you suddenly silent? Come out and continue praising. We're all waiting for you to praise him. Tell us, are you secretly wiping your tears? Are you still a man? Weren't you talkative before? Every time Lu Qing won, you would shower him with compliments. Why are you mute today? Lu Qing defeated the warrior sage. He defeated the warrior sage. Aren't you going to say something? Damn it, my mood is ruined by you guys. Kai Zhongming said in a low voice, annoyed and amused. Don't you guys know? This is called saying, silence is better than words. This is the highest award. Commentator, you really don't lose with words. Talker lives up to his nickname. When you and Lu Qing combine, you can dominate every second of the challenge tournament. I remember the Dragon Ball combination technique. Oh no, I've exposed my age. Lu Qing wins? In a VIP room. Geezer sure raised his eyebrows and laughed. He extended his hand to the side and said, Wuguang, my disciple isn't bad, right? His hand missed. He turned his head and saw that the seat beside him was empty. Taoist Wuguang had left at some point. Where is he? Asked Shi Jianghu. Queen of Thought, Fei Dan and the others looked at each other blankly. Lu Qing enjoyed the joy of victory as he walked back to his exclusive lounge and took his phone from Amen. Yan Zhika had already sent him several emojis. Some were sitting in a daze, some were pale with fright, some were waving tail, some were setting off firecrackers to celebrate, and some were offering kisses. After sending these emojis, she was more concerned about another question. How are your injuries? A few broken ribs and countless wounds on my body. Lu Qing grinned. I'll be lucky if I can recover 50 to 60% by the time the finals begin. Bone fractures were different from bone fractures. They couldn't be healed in 2 or 3 days. By the time the finals began, he would barely be able to hold on. Facing Dong Baxin, one of the top 3 players in the world, in such a state, the result was obvious. You're fine. How can Warrior Sage not pay the price? Yan Zhika tried her best to comfort him. Maybe Renli can create some trouble for Dong Baxin and leave him with a hidden danger? That's true. Lu Qing smiled and asked, Cuckoo, shouldn't you be busy with your studies today? Why do I feel like I've watched the entire competition? She replied with an angry eyes, I don't care if it dies. Chapter 740. After treating his injuries, Lu Qing was in no hurry to leave and return to the hotel. Instead, he stayed in the exclusive lounge to watch the second semi-final match. Although everyone believed that Kirin Dong Baxin would win, actual combat was always full of surprises. Lu Qing couldn't guarantee that Renli would definitely lose. In the arena, absolute strength didn't mean absolute victory. There were many factors that could affect the outcome, such as mentality, courage, perseverance, character and importance, physical condition, mental state, and the ability to counter each other. Under the circumstances where there wasn't a huge gap between realms, it wasn't impossible for a third-pin physical invulnerability expert to win against the Warrior Sage. However, the probability was very low. Back when Chen Donglu was beaten to the brink of collapse by the Dragon King, he was always doubting and denying himself. As a result, he was indecisive and lost to second-pin and third-pin opponents consecutively. It took him a while to get rid of the shadow and walk out of it. Therefore, Renli, who was at the level of a quasi-first pin, was only slightly weaker than Dong Baxin. If she really had some sort of trump card that no one knew about and used it at the right time in addition to the other party's pride and contempt, the result might have been reversed. For most superclass fighters, they might win 7 or 8 out of 10 matches against ordinary first-pin fighters. However, when it came to a single match, it was hard to say for sure. If that wasn't the case, upsets wouldn't exist. Title matches wouldn't exist either. That would be like going back to ancient times, when the Dragon King and the Warrior Sage would have a match every year. Lu Qing sipped on his hot drink and watched the big screen leisurely. Since the start of the match, the development was exactly what everyone expected. Renli relied on her wind sect movements to tangle with Dong Baxin's aggressive attacks. She patiently wore him down and occasionally counterattacked. After 3 or 4 minutes, Renli gradually fell into a passive position and could only hold on bitterly. After a while, she was surrounded by dangers from time to time. It seemed that failure was only a matter of time. During this process, Dong Baxin saw that she used a lot of new things that originated from the Wind Sect and the Plague Sect but were branded with her own characteristics. However, they were all countered by Dong Baxin. It's almost over. Lu Qing sighed as he controlled his body and started to repair the minute details. At that moment, when Renli couldn't dodge and seemed to have lost her ability to defend herself, a pure sword light flashed and went straight for Dong Baxin. Bang! Renli was struck by the palm and was sent flying. Blood gushed out from her mouth while Dong Baxin stood in place with a strange expression on his face. The long sword had pierced through his body, creating a hideous wound. Thump! Renli fell outside the arena. She struggled a few times but failed to stand up. The referee announced Dong Baxian's victory and signaled for the medical staff to come over as soon as possible. Seeing this change, Lu Qing frowned. With Dong Baxian's level and strength, he shouldn't have been unable to block Ren Li's last desperate attack. Why was he half a beat slower? Why was he injured in exchange for victory? And why was his injury so serious? Soon he thought of the hidden scent that Ren Li had used when she was in the dance stage. He replayed the previous 3 minutes in his mind and realized that Dong Baxian's sluggishness wasn't sudden. It had been there for a long time, but it wasn't so obvious. As a bystander, he couldn't see it. Is this the secret art of physical invulnerability corresponding to hidden fragrance? The Kongtong school uses the Wind sect as the core and blends the incomplete chapters of the Plague sect? A terrifying biological weapon? Wouldn't it be too scary when combined with the Wind sect's movement technique? Fortunately, Heaven's equal sword Feng Ji had never been involved in this field. Lu Qing retracted his gaze and came to a conclusion. Dong Baxian's injury was probably more serious than it looked. Cuckoo's words had come true, hadn't they? Lu Qing shared this with the busy Yanjika. Then he got up slowly, met up with Amen, and returned to the hotel. Just as he entered the suite, he received a call from Empress Luo Ning Zitong. Have you been blessed by divine monk Faiyuan recently? This kind of luck is simply enviable. She tried her best to learn the internet slang of children, to keep her spirit young. However, she didn't realize that this was a trend from a few years ago. What's wrong, Sister Ning? Lu Qing roughly guessed that it was about Dong Baxian. However, he was puzzled that Empress Luo would call him personally. Ning Zitong chuckled. I received news from the organizing committee that Dong Baxian is most likely going to withdraw from the competition due to his injury. That girl from Kongtong School sure is ruthless. Of course, Chihuahuas are much more ruthless than big dogs like Huskies and Alaskan Malamutes. Lu Qing thought to himself. Then he froze. Wait a minute? Dong Baxian is going to withdraw from the competition due to his injury? Doesn't that mean I'm guaranteed a spot in the final challenge? This luck, I don't even dare to think about it. Lu Qing gave a perfunctory reply. When Empress Luo hung up the phone, he still couldn't believe what had happened. He opened Weibo and saw that He Xiaowei had posted a new post. According to insider information, Dong Baxian may be withdrawing from the competition due to his injury. In an instant he received hundreds of replies. What the F***ck withdrawing from the competition? Another victim of the poison milk, and the effects are extremely devastating. I'm kneeling, salute to the poison milk hierarch. You just healed him once and he can't take it anymore. This skill is comparable to FGW's causal weapon. He's invincible. Maybe it's because of Ren Li's luck. But Lu Qing is the one benefiting. He must have done something. Sigh, if Dong Baxian had gotten the right to challenge, he might have had a chance of winning against the Dragon King. However, Lu Qing is still far from it. The Battle of Warrior Sage in July is a foregone conclusion. Yeah, it's boring. The Dragon King will win anyway. The corner of Lu Qing's mouth twitched. He felt that this matter was too surreal. Suddenly he received a message from talker Kai Xiaoming. Have you been stepping on dog shit lately? Lu Qing replied, amused and annoyed at the same time. You pooped? While many of his friends were looking for him, Yanjika took the opportunity to say, scared. Am I a jinx? No way. This is called prophecy coming true. You have a golden mouth and jade teeth and your words are law. Your character is shining brilliantly. Lu Qing praised with a smile. While they were chatting, his phone rang again. It was Empress Luo. Sister Ning, has Dong Baxian confirmed his withdrawal from the competition? Asked Lu Qing when the call went through. Ning Zitong chuckled. No, I'm telling you. His injuries are serious, but he has decided to continue the competition. After all, there's only one match left. Given Dong Baxian's pride and arrogance, he must think that he can beat you in his half-crippled state. And he has a high chance of winning. Lu Qing chuckled upon hearing that. He could feel his fighting spirit surging and burning. Then I'll wait and see. Chapter 741. May 21st, 8 p.m. Jianghu Stadium. The spectator stands were packed with people, their shouts deafening. Lu Qing stood in the middle, recalling the scene of the University Martial Arts Tournament finals. It felt like a lifetime ago. In front of him, Dong Baxian left the exit and walked over step by step. He was wearing a light white martial arts suit with crimson markings. He was tall, about 1.9 meters tall, but he didn't look clumsy. Instead, he gave off a slender vibe. Dong Baxian's hair was combed up and tied into a simple bun. His facial features weren't outstanding, but they were well defined. He looked masculine and powerful, as if he was looking down on the world. He didn't look too good, and one could see the discomfort in his gait. As a result, he didn't reveal his aura and engage in a mental battle. When he stopped at the predetermined spot, the referee glanced at the electronic watch on his wrist, pushed his sunglasses up and raised his right hand. Conversation time starts now. Dong Baxian looked at Lu Qing, his eyes filled with an unruliness that didn't belong to someone his age. His lips curled slightly as he spoke calmly. I know my injuries are much more serious than yours. My chances of winning today aren't high. He's not as arrogant and conceited as I thought. Lu Qing was slightly taken aback, so he reined in his thoughts and waited for him to continue. Dong Baxian tilted his head, shifted his gaze up, and stared at the lights in the dome. Compared to the title of Kirin, I miss my title of king more. I can be defeated, but I will never admit defeat, even if it's just an injury. Unless I can no longer move. This was the philosophy and will of the warrior king. At this point he smiled faintly. Besides, it's not like I'm bound to lose. There's still hope if I give it a try, but there's no chance at all if I withdraw directly. Even if the chances aren't high, I'll do my best to pursue it. Dong Baxian's aura suddenly erupted. The light from the dome seemed to be attracted by an invisible object and firmly attached to his body, covering him with a pure and brilliant armor. That kind of upright, proud, tyrannical, and disdainful feeling shot straight to the clouds. Influenced by his words, Lu Qing's fighting spirit also surged. He lowered his waist and replied with a smile, I'll also do my best to pursue victory. The two of them stopped talking. Their auras affected the heavens and the earth, changing the atmosphere in the stadium. There was a flash of light that tried to illuminate everything, and there was also a snowstorm that tried to bury everything. The referee retreated step by step to the edge. After waiting for a moment, he raised his right arm and swung it down. Begin. Thump. Dong Baxian, draped in a cloak of light, took a step forward in a standard offensive posture. Lu Qing reacted immediately. With a twist of his waist and back, he turned around and attacked his opponent from the side with the momentum of the blizzard. At this moment, under Dong Baxian's martial arts suit, his veins bulged like dragons. His body suddenly disappeared and reappeared in front of Lu Qing at supersonic speed. Without any fancy moves, he charged straight at Lu Qing. Golden Scripture of Donghuang Shunpa. The battle was intense from the very beginning. A few minutes later, the Jianghu Stadium was filled with craters. There were flying rocks everywhere, glass-like objects that had melted and reformed, as well as charred and frozen traces. In the largest shallow pit, Lu Qing and Dong Baxian were only 2 to 3 meters apart from each other. Both of them looked extremely pathetic. After blacking out for a while, Lu Qing regained consciousness. He felt his spirit was almost drained, and his head was throbbing with a piercing pain. He struggled to stand up, only to realize that he had fractured a few parts of his body, including his left arm. The biggest wound was so deep that his internal organs could be seen. Bam! Lu Qing finally got up. He swayed a little and almost lost his footing. He looked up and saw Dong Baxian trying to stand up but failing repeatedly. He was in a worse state than him. What a tragic battle. If I had underestimated him, I might have fallen into Dong Baxian's trap and been successfully defeated by him as the weak. His words at the start were to express his determination and willpower, but at the same time, it was also a show of weakness to numb me. Who would have thought that once we started fighting he would go all out without a care in the world? Luckily, I wasn't blindly optimistic and still took this combat king seriously. In the end, we were just rookies. As his thoughts raced, Lu Qing took a deep breath and resisted the urge to visualize. He used a simplified version of the confrontation formula on Dong Baxian. Instantly, Dong Baxian's exhaustion overwhelmed him and he stopped struggling. He was already at his limit, so all he wanted was to lie down and rest. Lu Qing, on the other hand, felt his body and mind clear. His wounds wriggled faster and healed slightly. Gently biting the tip of his tongue, Lu Qing resisted the urge to sleep. He moved his feet and came beside the defenseless Dong Baxian. Seeing that the tip of his foot was pressed against his opponent's temple, the referee heaved a sigh of relief. He raised his right hand and announced loudly, Lu Qing. He took a deep breath and raised his voice by a few notches. Victory. Phew. Lu Qing exhaled a turbid breath. His vision darkened again as golden spots of light danced around, making him break out in cold sweat. Finally, I've won the right to challenge. The Warrior Sage Challenge was in mid-July. He had plenty of time to recover to his peak condition. Of course, his opponent then would be the Dragon King in full strength. Upon hearing the referee's announcement, the relevant sections of the internet went into an uproar. Headlines popped up like mushrooms after a rain. Lu Qing lives up to expectations. Victory. Champion of the Heavenly Sons of Heaven, won the right to challenge for a title half a year earlier than Wisdom King. Consecutively defeating Warrior Sage and Kirin, Lu Qing's first place in the elimination round is well-deserved. Is he expected to win his first title in July? Dragon Tiger battle in July. Apart from these praises, there were also many people expressing their disappointment. I can foresee that the Warrior Sage battle in July will be very boring. I'm not belittling Lu Qing. He will definitely have many titles in the future. However, he's still too inexperienced. Winning the right to challenge this time was more of a fluke factor. In this state, he has almost no chance of winning against the unruffled Dragon King. Comparatively speaking, if Dong Ba were to challenge him first, he would at least have a 30% chance of winning. Alright, let's look at this match without any suspense with blessings. Lu Qing didn't pay attention to the comments online as he was treating his injuries. When his right hand was free, he quickly replied to Yenjika. Proud smile emoji. The first match you'll watch when you return to China will be the Warrior Sage battle between me and Dragon King. Yenjika sent an emoji of pushing up her sunglasses. She replied, "Are you inviting me?" "Of course." Lu Qing replied with a smile. After chatting for a while, Yenjika put down her phone and looked at the information on the computer screen. She thought for a while and flipped to July, on the decorative calendar at the side. She found 12th, and picked up a fountain pen to mark it. Before that it was 5th of July, when she returned to China. Yenjika took a deep look at the calendar and took a deep breath. She shook her fist lightly to encourage herself and then immersed herself in learning. After lying in the hospital for a few days, Lu Qing, who had recovered slightly, returned to the Longhu Club. He felt a little uneasy. According to the rumors about Dragon King's character and his observations over time, this top-notch physical invulnerability expert was indeed narrow-minded and indifferent to his challengers. He wouldn't even show them the slightest bit of respect, let alone training them. In the past, he didn't have the qualifications to enjoy such treatment. However, now that he had obtained the right to challenge the Warrior Sage, Dragon King's attitude might change. After changing his clothes, Lu Qing stepped into the physical invulnerability training ground. Just as he was about to enter his own section, he saw Dragon King Qin Chitao standing in front of him in a navy blue suit. He was expressionless and majestic. "How's your injury?" Qin Chitao asked in a low voice. "It's almost done. I can start training now," Lu Qing replied after some consideration. Qin Chitao nodded indiscernibly and pointed to the lakeside. "Since you've recovered, let's start sparring." "Okay." Lu Qing was delighted at first but was soon filled with doubts. Dragon King's attitude is different from what I expected. Did he have a change of heart? But as the saying goes, a leopard can't change its spots. Could it be that he still thinks that I'm not qualified and can easily beat me? Thinking about it, I'm a little disappointed. At this moment, Qin Chitao had already turned around and walked out with his hands behind his back. Lu Qing quickly gathered his thoughts and followed him. He subconsciously touched the corner of his mouth and felt an inexplicable pain. Chapter 742. She counted down the days as she busied herself. May was finally over and June was coming to an end. Yenjika changed her clothes, grabbed her backpack and walked towards the bedroom door. Before she left, she subconsciously looked back at the marked calendar. It's almost time. The busiest thing is done. All that's left is the paperwork. She looked away and walked down the stairs briskly. She got into Du Yan's car and arrived at the Connecticut campus. The greenery here was excellent. Trees were everywhere and many of the roads were quite interesting. Walking among them and seeing all this, Yenjika suddenly realized that she had not paid attention to the scenery around her for a long time. She was so busy that she could not bear to waste a minute and a second on unimportant things. But now it's all over. She could relax again. She pursed her lips into a sweet smile. Her right foot stepped lightly in front of her left foot, and then her left foot did the same. She walked slowly in a straight line. Her body swayed slightly from time to time, as if she was simulating an invisible balance beam. She entered a quiet building at the end of the road and knocked on the door of her tutor's office. "Good morning, Mr. Furman. Are you looking for me?" Her tutor, Furman, was almost 80 years old. His face was full of wrinkles and age spots, but he was still hale and hearty. He did not have the cloudy eyes of his peers. He turned his chair and looked at Yenjika. He crossed his hands in front of his chest and smiled. Sophia, are you really not going to consider continuing? Over the past 2 years, you have displayed outstanding talent and proven your ability. Your rigorous thinking, keen observation, and unique insights have left a deep impression on me. Why don't you continue? Yes, a degree is just a performance. It is not necessarily important. But you have just opened the door to this field. There are so many treasures waiting for you to explore and obtain. If you stay here, you will have a deeper understanding of this field. You will also have opportunities to get in touch with frontier affairs. I believe that there is no other place in the world that suits you better than here. A world-class master, a master who had brought out so many economic award winners, had given her such high recognition. Yenjika felt satisfied and happy as if she had gained something. She bit her lower lip and looked up. After a moment of silence, she said, Mr. Furman, thank you very much for your recognition. I'm very excited. Becoming the best in this field has always been my dream, and it hasn't changed even now. However, it has nothing to do with external factors. It's just a personal hobby of mine. I will continue, but not here and not necessarily in the next few years. Since I have opened the door, I want to spend my life exploring, researching, and enjoying it slowly. It's like tasting a delicacy. Maybe I will come back for a short visit, but not now. I hope you don't mind that I often send you emails to ask you questions or discuss. Earth is just a village. It doesn't matter where it is. Furman nodded slowly. All right. He waited for a few seconds before asking again, can you tell me why? Yenjika's dimples could be seen. Because I have more important things to do. Furman didn't mention this matter again and signaled for the girl to leave. Yenjika turned around and slowly left the small building. The sun was just right outside. It was warm but not hot. The ground was shining with golden light. Her mood was calm and peaceful, but there were bubbles bubbling inside her. Suddenly she thought of a song and couldn't help but hum its melody silently. I'm going to marry you tomorrow. On a sunny morning, Lu Qing put on his disguise and arrived at the International Arrival Hall of Huaqing Heishui Airport. Today is the day little fairy returns. The torturous long-distance relationship is coming to an end. Lu Qing couldn't hold back his excitement. If it weren't for the Warrior Sage Battle Finals in a few days, he would have used the opportunity in the second half of the year to fly over to pick her up. Songqing University and Kongshan University's joint training program was equivalent to a master's degree. Students could obtain degrees from both universities. Previously, Cuckoo had wanted to shorten the training period to 3 years, but she had failed to do so because the curriculum was already very tight. Hence, it was still the normal 4 years. 4 years was a long time for a young man in his 20s. And it is finally coming to an end. Lu Qing couldn't calm down. He looked down at the time, the flight schedule, and the bouquet of flowers in his arms. My brain must have gone haywire. Why did I think of buying a bouquet of flowers? Feels so silly to wait like this. Lu Qing couldn't help but criticize himself. But in the blink of an eye, he was drowned by his memories. The farewell was still vivid in his mind. Little Fairy's confession, no longer holding back her tears, was as clear as yesterday. Above the clouds, the plane flew at high speed. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled below. On such a journey, bumps were inevitable. Yenjika was wearing an eye mask. She tossed and turned but couldn't fall asleep. Suddenly there was a violent jolt. The plane seemed to have been forcefully pushed to the side. Many people screamed. Unpacked coffee, food, and other things flew everywhere. Yenjika took off the blindfold abruptly and grabbed the armrest with both hands. She was obviously nervous. To her, this wasn't a normal reaction. She had always boasted that she wasn't afraid of death. Born with a congenital defect, she was weak and sickly since young. Before the age of 10, she was admitted to the hospital every few days. Death was so close at hand. Such an experience made Yenjika feel that she didn't care about life and death. She felt that it was just a natural outcome and that there was nothing to be afraid of. That was why she wasn't afraid of heights, extreme sports like bungee jumping, or the unexpected changes in the plane. But now she couldn't control her anxiety and fear. And these emotions got worse as the bumpy ride continued. Because she had finally finished her education, because her long-distance relationship was about to come to fruition, because a new phase of her life was about to begin, because there was a silly guy waiting for her at the airport. She wasn't afraid of death, but she was afraid of regret, her hands clenched tighter and tighter, her veins popping. Yenjika could barely hear the consolation from the radio. Half of her mind was filled with worry and fear, and the other half was rational but panicked thinking. If the plane crashes into the sea with my strength and supernatural ability, I should have a good chance of surviving. If that happens, Qing will definitely search for me at all costs. Then he will miss the Battle of Warrior Sage. Why am I thinking about this mess at this time? If something really happens, how am I going to save myself? As her thoughts flashed, the plane finally stabilized. The cabin was a mess. Phew. Yenjika exhaled. Her tense muscles and tendons relaxed and she felt exhausted. She leaned back and thought, if Qing knows that I'm scared because of this, he'll definitely laugh at me. After some time, the plane finally arrived and landed. Yenjika, who was exhausted, found her luggage and went to the hall with the remaining tension. Before she could move her eyes, she saw the familiar guy holding a bouquet of flowers. He pretended to be gentle and natural and smiled. Let's go home. The remaining tension disappeared. Yenjika's vision blurred. She reached out and grabbed the bouquet of flowers. She raised her chin slightly and said with a hint of sobbing, it's me who's taking you home. It's good to be home. P.S. The Chidian app has been updated recently. Once you fix the wrong words in the article, all the chapters before this node will disappear. Previously, the section about Coach Shi and Wu Guang was swallowed up by almost 200 articles. Therefore, I haven't been updating recently. Instead, I'm updating and updating again. However, if there are any omissions, I won't update them in case the chapter disappears. Chapter 743. July 12, 6 in the evening, Silk Road Hotel, Heshi City. Lu Qing stood in front of the mirror, smiling as he watched Yenjika tidy his collar and smooth out his wrinkles. Done. So handsome. She looked him up and down, clapped her hands and nodded in satisfaction. Lu Qing looked at himself in the mirror. His martial arts suit was white, giving off a youthful vibe. The black edges gave off a sense of steadiness, which complemented his own temperament. It made his face, which was not considered handsome, look quite attractive. He laughed involuntarily. Don't go against your conscience and praise me. I've always won with my inner qualities, not superficial looks. Yenjika was amused. She wrinkled her cute nose and said, haven't you heard that beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Or do you not trust your wife's taste? Before Lu Qing could answer, she nudged her husband's shoulder. It's time for you to leave. Go to Jianghu Stadium and adjust your condition. I'll be there for uncle and auntie. Don't worry. The Battle of Warrior Sage was one of the earliest title matches. It retained many of the ancient dueling traditions. For example, the final match was a single match to determine the winner. Due to this reason, Lu Qing, who had several VIP room slots, formed a group of friends and family, including travel and lodging. Lu Qing walked to the door and chuckled. Uncle and auntie? Have you forgotten what to call them again? After the Battle of Warrior Sage ends, we can take the opportunity to discuss the wedding while our families are together. Why do I feel like you're raising flags? Yenjika looked at him and joked. It's like the old general on the stage with flags all over his body. Once you're in debt, you won't have to worry anymore, Lu Qing joked. Just as he pulled open the door and was about to leave, she suddenly pulled him back. Yenjika came up to him, tiptoed, and kissed him lightly on the lips. Then she stood straight and looked at him with a smile. Good luck. At this point, she deliberately made her tone lively. I'll be waiting for you to come back to discuss the wedding. Full of motivation. Lu Qing smiled and pumped his fist. Then he stepped out of the room like a general on an expedition. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly turned back and teased, remember to call me mom and dad. Yenjika tilted her head and looked to the side. A second later, she turned back and watched Lu Qing enter the elevator with her dimples. After waiting for a while, Yenjika packed up her belongings and went to the lobby of the hotel. After a while, she saw the Lu couple, accompanied by Qi Yunfei, Qin Xiaoxiao and other younger generation walking over. They were dressed as if they were going to attend a wedding. When Qing and I hold a banquet, it will be like this. Yenjika's bright eyes rolled up, her thoughts drifting. As her thoughts ran wild, she stepped forward and blurted out, Dad, Mom? Before she could finish speaking, she was already stunned. After 4 years of studying abroad, she was no longer the shy little girl she used to be. However, at this moment she still blushed. Oh no, I've been led into a ditch by Qing. How embarrassing. I don't want to stay here, I want to go back. Seeing Lu Jisheng, Qi Fang and the others' dumbfounded expressions, Yenjika hated that there was not a crack in the ground for her to hide in. She quickly recalled how she felt during the summit forum speech and forced herself to calm down. Visualizing the confrontation formula, she pretended as if nothing had happened and smiled. "Uncle Auntie, the car is just outside. Let's go out." Lu Jisheng and Qi Fang looked at each other with kind smiles on their faces. They replied in unison, "Okay, okay, okay." After getting in the car, Yenjika had the style of Wang Gu, talking to Qi Yunfei, Qin Xiaoxiao, and Ma Shi endlessly. From time to time, she took advantage of their topics so that the Lu couple could interrupt and not feel neglected. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Jiuan Stadium. The girl led them through the VIP passageway and into the private room. Looking at the familiar faces of the physical invulnerability mighty ones walking around, Qi Fang suddenly pulled Lu Jisheng. "Help me check if my collar is done. Are there any threads on the back? Seriously, why are you so nervous?" Granny Lu entered the Grandview Garden. Lu Jisheng laughed and pretended to size her up. "No problem." At this moment, he glanced outside and pointed at himself. "Should I keep it all buttoned up or unbuttoned?" "Aren't you not nervous?" Qi Fang scolded him jokingly. "This is being polite, being polite." Lu Jisheng answered with difficulty. Then he lowered his voice and said, "Zhika's parents will be coming later. We have to make Qing proud." "Only you can do it," Qi Fang said, but she was scrutinizing her husband again. She even pulled Qi Yunfei, Qin Xiaoxiao, and the rest over to provide objective opinions. Yenjika was already in the dance stage. She had sharp eyes and ears. How could she not hear her parents-in-law's whispers? She held back her laughter and deliberately went outside to welcome her relatives, leaving them some space in the private room. After a few minutes, she saw her father, Yan Kai, and Empress Dowager, Ji Mingyu, walking in hand. They were so affectionate as if they had just been married. "Where are Grandpa and Grandma?" Yenjika asked curiously. "They went to chat with their old friends," Ji Mingyu replied with a smile. They were worried that Lu's parents would be too nervous and stressed. "That's true." Yenjika heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed her brows. "You're siding with an outsider. First, you asked us to come back early from Kingstown, and then you secretly flew straight to Lu's place. You haven't been home for several days. You're not even married yet." Seeing her daughter's smile, Ji Mingyu's face changed. She scolded her daughter, and in return she acted like a spoiled child. In the private room next to them, Kai Zongming smiled at his former roommates, Zhao Chong, Zhang Jingye, Qiu Zhigao, former teammates Li Mao, Sun Jian, He Zi, and the non-staff member Yan Xiaoling. "This is not a competition at all. It's more like a gathering of old friends. It's like attending a feast." Just then a few more people came in through the door. The leader was a chubby man with an amiable appearance. The other was very tall and had a restrained aura. They were Jiang Fei and Qin Rui. The other two seemed to be their girlfriends. Looking at the room full of strangers, Jiang Fei suddenly felt a little uneasy, although he recognized Kai Zongming and the other members of the martial arts club. The voices suddenly disappeared. The atmosphere became quiet and a little awkward. But some people were born to be in this kind of situation. Kai Zongming approached and said with a bright smile, "Jiang Fei? Qin Rui? I often hear Qing mention you guys. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Kai Zongming. You can call me Talker." The estrangement was broken. With Lu Qing as the link and Little Ming as the lubricant in the middle, everyone was about the same age. Soon they had a good chat and the atmosphere became warm again. On the aisle outside the door, Lin Kei walked in with his hands in his pockets, wearing a white shirt and black pants. He glanced at the two boxes where his relatives were, and then at the place where the voices of Kai Zongming and the others came from. Without hesitation, he pushed open the door behind him and sat quietly in the corner, as if he was still a member of the Songqing University Martial Arts Club. The sky was getting dark. The audience sped up to find their seats. Comrade Shi Jianghu also came to the VIP private room where his old friends were. He paused, took out his phone and looked at the photos in the album. He nodded silently. "Well, this is what Wukong looks like. I can't forget." After confirming, he smiled leisurely and pushed the door open. "Dragon King? Lu Qing." As the audience grew, cheers started to warm up the atmosphere. The competition didn't feel like a final battle. Instead, it felt like a festive festival. Of course, the reporters didn't think so. They used all kinds of methods to exaggerate the tension and anticipation of the competition. Will it be the handover of Longhu's authority? How far is Lu Qing from Dragon King? According to research, less than 10% of people think Lu Qing can win. Lu Qing will be the warrior sage in the future, but he definitely won't be the winner today. Hope is zero. Kai Zhongming led the conversation while browsing the content and gathering information. Seeing that it was time, he smiled at Li Mao, Jiang Fei and the others. I'm going to start working. He took out his laptop from his backpack and set up various peripherals. After a while he started the live broadcast. Everyone, it's time for you to experience the VIP private rooms of Jiuan Stadium. In the exclusive resting room, Lu Qing opened his eyes, got up slowly and walked to the door. Clang. He pushed open the door, welcomed the flowing light and walked step by step to the grand stage. The moment he entered the venue, the cheers were even louder. Lu Qing waved his hand and turned to look at the few VIP private rooms that belonged to him. There is a little bit of light in his life there. He calmed himself down, retracted his gaze and turned to look at the center of the arena. Dragon King Qin Shitao was already standing there. He was wearing a navy blue suit and his back was straight. He looked majestic and tall, like a volcano that was about to erupt. Chapter 744. In the past 6 months, Lu Qing hadn't had a formal battle with Dragon King. However, they had never stopped sparring in private. In the past 2 months he had only won once or twice out of 10 times, and those times were when both parties were equally restrained. This meant that things would get worse in a crucial battle. The saying that there was zero hope was too biased, but a 10% chance of winning was close to the truth. This was the consensus of the top experts, as well as Lu Qing's understanding. But as long as there was a glimmer of hope, he wouldn't be dejected or afraid. He would use all his passion and courage to chase, grasp, and hold on until the end. This was a trait he had developed throughout his journey, and also influenced by Battle King Dong Baxian. He could fail, but he couldn't admit defeat. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Lu Qing's emotions flowed like a calm tide. His will grew steadier and his aura was contained. When he reached his predetermined position, he finally raised his gaze and looked straight at his opponent as the challenger. It was a handsome, masculine face with chiseled features. It was a face that no expert in the world would dare to look at for 10 years. Dragon King Qin Shitao. Although the referee had retreated to the edge, he could sense the smell of gunpowder in the air. A battle was about to break out. Just like the ancient rules used to determine the winner, the Battle of Warrior Sage followed another tradition, and that was that there was no conversation time. Before Lu Qing could gather his 5 flames and prepare, the referee glanced at the hanging electronic clock, raised his right arm and swung it down heavily. Begin. The new Battle of Warrior Sage had begun. The loser would not be remembered, and the winner would be crowned the champion. Bam! Qin Shitao's accumulated aura exploded like a volcano erupting horizontally. Using his right fist, which was covered in a thick layer of faint purple, he forcefully dragged his body across the 30-meter distance towards Lu Qing's face. Fast and fierce. This wasn't much weaker than Dong Baxian's Xuanpa or Qian Dongluo's Thunderbolt. In terms of aura, it was even better. The air around them reddened rapidly as though reflecting the sea of flames. The clash seemed to have blended into one with the referee's voice, the change in environment and the passage of time. Lu Qing had the time and ability to dodge, but for some reason he was half a beat slower, as though it was destined to be so. But under Qin Shitao's guidance, his spirit trembled. His body, as though stimulated, surged with unprecedented strength. He broke through his condition and climbed to a new peak. Is this the sharpening and strengthening of a top-level battle? How amazing. In a fight between masters, every second counts. Lu Qing had lost the best chance to dodge because of his slow movement. He could only suppress his thoughts, lower his waist and twist his muscles and fascia. He shook out his right arm and punched out like a cannonball. Attack against attack. Because he was inferior to the Dragon King in all aspects of the fire sect, he did not use his weakness to attack the Dragon King's strength. Instead, he catalyzed the Ice Soul technique to counter the Dragon King's strength. Then, he accumulated the Emperor Yen technique in each of his punches, accumulating his chi and unleashing his full power. In a split second, he had already decided on his follow-up strategy. Bam! Fists collided and sparks flew in all directions. However, most of the faint purple flames were sealed in ice. When they merged or tore apart everything, they exhausted themselves and dimmed and extinguished. There were even a few translucent purple snowflakes that fluttered in midair. Bam! Qin Shitao stretched his back and threw another punch in an extremely aggressive and domineering manner. It was like a prairie fire. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Lu Qing couldn't escape from the series of wild attacks. He could only defend passively. But he didn't panic. His ice heart froze and his spirit settled. He countered with punch after punch of ice spirit. Under the clash of cold and heat, thin mist filled the air. It was like a fairyland. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. As the flames around them grew brighter and brighter, Lu Qing suddenly opened his mouth and let out a roar. His left fist punched out with bulging muscles. His Emperor Yin force had been accumulated to the limit. A layer of light purple ignited and covered the area heavily. It seemed to be only a small amount, but it was actually formed by the compression of countless Emperor Yin. If it exploded directly, it could flatten an area of 10 square meters and dig a hole. Chen Qitao's expression didn't change. He tightened his half-hanging left arm and swung it back. The surrounding flames seemed to have been summoned. They gathered at one point and lit up brightly. This was the advanced application of 9 rotations of 5 flames. Boom. A sudden light flashed, leaving the broadcast screen white. Then, smoke and dust expanded along with the flames, turning into a mushroom-like cloud that soared into the sky. Only then did the deafening sound of the explosion reverberate, causing the minds of the audience who had long been prepared to buzz, causing the ordinary glass in the unimportant places to crack and shatter. Before the terrifying shockwaves subsided, Chen Qitao broke through the layers of obstacles. Like a soldier walking in a rain of bullets, he closed in on Lu Qing again and launched another round of fire-like invasion. Just like that, he blocked Lu Cheng's ultimate move. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Lu Qing tried a few moves but still couldn't shake him off. Whether it was the buildup of Emperor Yin and Ice Spirit, the ingenious short-range changes, or the initial condensation of 5 flames, they were all destroyed by Dragon King Chen Qitao's own fire sect ferocious attacks. He fully demonstrated what it meant to defeat 10 with 1 strength. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, Lu Qing suddenly felt weightless in a collision between an elbow and a fist. Like a kite with a broken string, he flew backwards. While he was still in the air, he had already unleashed 3 bursts of Emperor Yin force, helping him change direction 3 times in a row to escape. However, Dragon King Chen Qitao was also a fire sect physical invulnerability expert. His moves were purer than Lu Cheng's. He pounced forward and changed direction, locking onto his opponent with ease. At this moment, ice crystals appeared on the surface of Lu Cheng's body. He used this opportunity to squeeze out new flame force and unleashed another burst. Bam! There was a faint sound coming from his body. His body, which was already at the end of its flight, made a strange turn and bounced away. For changes of direction. This was the result of Lu Cheng's combination of cosmic universe style and fire sect techniques. He had broken the ceiling of physical invulnerability experts who could only change direction 3 times. This was also one of his trump cards today. Seeing that Dragon King seemed to be powerless, Lu Cheng's eyes suddenly froze. This was because the sparks of fire around Chen Qitao had gathered into a ball at some point. Bam! The explosion of the fireball gave the Dragon King a new impetus to change its direction, allowing it to charge over with a roar. He's really not far from the Forbidden Land. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to change direction 4 times. Lu Qing seemed to have understood. Because his mesmerizing snow steps footwork was interrupted, he had no choice but to fall into Dragon King's suppression again and face thousands of punches and kicks. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. He had used up all his trump cards but still couldn't turn the situation around. Gradually he could only hold on and wait. In the stands and in the box, Yanzhika, Qifeng, Ji Mingyu, Jiang Fei, and the rest subconsciously held their breaths. Their hands were either tightly clenched or clenched into fists. Rationally, they knew that Lu Cheng's chances of winning today were very low. They were mainly here to witness his first title match and enjoy the excitement. However, when the battle officially began, they couldn't help but feel a little hopeful, hoping for a miracle. However, Dragon King at 100% once again showed what the legendary twins were, and what the era of Dragon King and Warrior Sage was. It seemed that it wouldn't be long before Lu Qing swallowed the bitter pill of defeat. And it was obvious that he had used up all his tricks. As if they were listening to a countdown, the cheers of the audience quieted down. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. With the burning pain in his mind and the erosion of the flames, Lu Qing was triggered. His surroundings turned gloomy. A feeling of boundless coldness, silence, and loneliness materialized. In the depths of this gloomy darkness, emotions such as love, pity, protection, and obsession to live turned into stars, illuminating the cold, darkness, and loneliness around him. This was Lu Cheng's increasingly perfected state of mind to resist the spread of Dragon King's prairie fire. At his peak, Dragon King's punches and kicks carried some state of mind. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Domineering, barbaric, scorching and terrifying feelings burned fiercely. With Chen Qitao's aggressive punches and kicks, they slowly but surely devoured Lu Cheng's universe. The gloomy darkness began to roll back, and the radiance was pressed closer and closer. Lu Cheng's mental state slowly shrank to only half an inch away from his body. After another 2 or 3 hits, it would be beaten back to its original state. Bam! The volcano erupted and the flames surged with the fists. Lu Cheng's body swayed slightly as he barely blocked Dragon King's fists. However, his own state of mind was completely collapsing and shrinking inwards. The radiance merged into one and became more and more condensed. The darkness rolled back, wanting to devour and absorb them into nothingness. The end of the universe had come. In that split second, Lu Cheng seemed to be attracted by the picture. He suddenly thought of the small courtyard in the capital, the scroll hanging in Old May's room, the statue of the heavenly primogenitor, the restriction sect, the clear jade chapter, and the palm as white as jade pressing down on him. The starry sky and the universe became smaller and smaller, more and more solidified. The stars were destroyed one by one, and the darkness rapidly shrank until it converged into a single point. Then it spurted out and shattered into pieces. How similar it was to what was happening now. All of a sudden, Lu Cheng seemed to have understood something. He no longer cared about the darkness that had returned to its original form. His force, mind, and everything else suddenly shrank inward, adding in the little bits of condensed brilliance. He added in the feelings of love, joy, pity, protection, and willingness to give up his life for this. After an instant, the darkness engulfed the radiance and condensed it into a single point. However, that single point was bursting with a blinding brilliance. Bam! As the brilliance burst forth, Lu Cheng threw the most powerful punch of his life. This wasn't just a punch of destruction, it was also a punch of creation. The great vitality of destruction. This was the essence of the restriction sect, Clear Jade chapter. Everything was destroyed and something new was born. Dragon King Chen Qitao's eyes were completely occupied by the jade white fist. However, he wasn't surprised. Instead, he made use of this stimulation to ignite his own spirit. All of a sudden, he transformed from numerous volcanoes into a real sun. He was heavy, hot, and terrifying. Bam! The sun fell, punching the void. The two fists collided, and the world seemed to freeze for an instant. Rumble. The Jianghu Stadium seemed to have experienced an earthquake as it shook violently. This time there was no mushroom cloud, no wind, and no flames. However, both Lu Cheng and Dragon King were shorter by a meter. With the fists as the center, a 1-meter-deep crater with a diameter of about 20 meters appeared in the arena. Many of Lu Cheng's capillaries were broken, and his clothes were torn in many places. Not a single piece of skin was left unscathed. His body felt drained. He was happy that he could throw such an earth-shattering punch, but also depressed that his body had deteriorated greatly. If Dragon King were to attack again, he would probably only be able to block a few punches. At this moment he saw Chen Qitao standing there. His breathing was deep and his vitality was weak. In contrast, illusory flames surged around him. The scarlet red and faint purple flames were scorching. Chance. The thought flashed through Lu Cheng's mind. Without thinking, he retracted his qi and blood and formed the last Do formula. Then his Dan force gushed out and he took a step forward. He was in front of Chen Qitao, and he threw a punch at his opponent's head. Layers of invisible flames gathered spontaneously. The closer Lu Cheng's fist was to Dragon King, the stronger the resistance. However, compared to the Do formula, it was still weak and could only slow down the speed. A second later, Lu Cheng's fist landed beside Chen Qitao's head and stopped there. There was no more resistance. He raised his head in shock and looked over. He saw that Dragon King's pupils had disappeared, leaving only a sea of flames. A sea of flames that felt unusually real. The sea of flames was reflected on the outside. Faint purple, scarlet red, light blue, and gold swirled in the air. In that instant, Lu Cheng inexplicably understood Dragon King's condition. Using the stimulation and catalysis of my punch, he burned himself and exceeded his limits. He finally broke through the gap between man and God and opened the door to the forbidden territory. Because the breakthrough was a process, not a node, he lost. At this moment, the fire cloud suddenly spread, turning the entire venue into a sea of flames. However, Lu Cheng didn't feel any heat or scorching heat. It was so real, yet so fake, just like Elder May's courtyard that was always like spring. Witnessing this scene, the warrior sage Qian Donglu, who was sitting in a private room, suddenly paled. It was as if a certain victory had been unexpectedly snatched away. Qin Chitao raised his head and looked over. His lips curled. He looked back at Lu Qing and nodded lightly. Well done. This was the first time Lu Qing saw such an obvious smile on his face. With that, Qin Chitao turned around, threw off his broken shoes, and walked barefooted out of Jianghu Stadium with his back straight. In the silence, the referee finally came back to his senses. He raised his right arm and announced loudly, "Lu Qing wins." The audience also came back to their senses and applauded, both for Dragon King and Lu Qing. Moments later, the spotlight shone on Lu Qing. The person in charge of the organizing committee shouted into the microphone, "Let's not talk about other things. Let's not worry about that for now. Let's welcome the new warrior sage. Warrior sage Lu Qing. Warrior sage, the saint of martial arts." Chapter 745. In the freshly decorated live streaming room, Xu Rui, who was wearing an intellectual knee-length dress, looked at Lu Qing and smiled. "I've been waiting for this interview for so long." She wanted to say, "You've been dragging it out for too long." However, when the words warrior sage entered her mind, she subconsciously changed to a more tactful way of saying it. Lu Qing didn't sit like a bell like most martial artists. Instead, he leaned back comfortably and said, "Can't help it. I have to focus on preparing for the warrior sage battle." "Alright, we're streaming online today. There's no delay or editing. If you say anything you shouldn't say, everyone will hear it immediately and won't be able to take it back. So think carefully," said Xu Rui half jokingly and half reminding. Lu Qing nodded with a smile. "Then I'll have to think twice before I act." Xu Rui held a stack of papers in her hand. It looked like the outline of the interview. However, she didn't even look at it, treating it as decoration. "First of all, congratulations on becoming the warrior sage," said Xu Rui with a bright smile. "After that battle, the evaluation of you online and offline has increased again. They're full of praises for you. Things like how there will be many superpowers in the future, how you've reached the level of Dragon King and Warrior Sage, how you're the king of the Age of Gods, and how you'll have the most titles in the future. What do you have to say about this?" Lu Qing thought for a few seconds before answering frankly, "When I first saw it, I was quite proud." Seeing Xu Rui break into laughter, he shook his head and sighed. "That's human nature. However, it does raise my status too much. I'll need at least a few more years to reach the level before Dragon King and Warrior Sage. Now, I'm in the same class as other superpowers. I'm not afraid of them and they won't be afraid of me. In a few more years, others might also reach the level before Dragon King and Warrior Sage. For example, Kirin and God-Slaying Saber who aren't even 50 years old, Wisdom King who'll be around 30, or Peng Liyun and Ren Li who have their own path." Xu Rui's eyes turned. She wasn't stingy with her praise. "But I believe you'll be the brightest and most dazzling one." "Thank you." Lu Qing could only reply. Xu Rui thought for a few seconds and continued to dig deeper into the topic. "I'm not just saying empty words. The punch you used to defeat the Dragon King to help the Dragon King break through was truly earth-shattering, world-shocking, and unparalleled. I think that, other than the Warrior Saint, none of the current superclass experts would be able to block that punch head-on." Lu Qing shook his head and laughed. "First of all, no matter how strong the move is, it's useless if it can't hit the target. If it can't be blocked, it can be dodged. Secondly, I can't use this punch casually. I need to be at the right time, place, and people." He spoke vaguely and didn't talk about the factors involved. After all, he couldn't let others know too much about his trump card. The reason he was able to throw that punch was mostly due to the terrifying pressure of the Dragon King. From his mind to his punches and kicks, he had used external forces to help him complete the condensation and simulate the scene of him returning to a single point. Without this, it would have taken him 5 to 6 years to complete it on his own accord. Besides, the Dragon King was able to cooperate so well because he had a good understanding of his own cosmic universe style. Secondly, he had been studying the Restriction Sect Clear Jade chapter for a long time. If it had been the Warrior Saint, he would have had to go through more trouble to achieve it. He might not even have been able to do it. As for other superclass experts, they wouldn't go through so much trouble to seek failure. They would deliberately avoid such situations. Only a punch with the right time, place, and people could defeat such a Dragon King. Xu Rui agreed and didn't ask any more questions. Instead, she smiled and said, "After witnessing it for 2 years, everyone is very interested in your cosmic universe-style martial arts. They look forward to it very much. I heard that you also have thoughts of starting your own sect. Well, not the independent kind. On behalf of the audience, I'll use this line to express my feelings. So, where can I buy it? Lu Qing pondered and said, I'll give the foundation to the martial arts schools of the Ice God sect and the Longhu Club. When there are good seedlings, maybe I'll take them as my disciples. Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Shu Rui sighed. It's a pity that I'm old and can't practice martial arts anymore. Not really, Lu Qing said politely. At the same time, he promoted his wife's plan. And the cosmic universe style can be used to nourish one's body and beautify one's face. Really? Shu Rui blurted out. Lu Qing smiled and said, let's not look at the advertisement but the effect. When the time comes, something similar will come out. Well, it's mainly my wife who changed it. Shu Rui's eyes were about to turn red. She just wanted to ask when the results would come out. She teased him and said that the majority of her female compatriots were looking forward to it. Then she smiled and said, Wife? You're calling her so intimately. You're not calling her your girlfriend but your wife? You're getting married soon? Yes, we've already gotten the marriage certificate. The only thing left is the wedding. It's in October. Lu Qing shared his joy. After the parents of both parties agreed on the wedding date, Lu Qing and Yin Zhika told them that they had already gotten the marriage certificate a few days later. Of course, they didn't say when they got it. Qi Fang and the others thought that it was done after the marriage was settled. Congratulations, congratulations. You've got a major exam and a minor exam. Shu Rui put the paper on her lap and greeted them with the etiquette of a martial artist. Without waiting for Lu Qing to answer, she asked with great interest, What kind of wedding do you want to have? More modern or more classical? More classical, but there's no such thing as a red veil. Lu Qing answered frankly. I'm looking forward to that scene. Shu Rui clapped her hands and said. The chatty interview continued for a while. Shu Rui thought of something and said with a smile, You've always said that the Dragon King is your idol. How does it feel to defeat your idol? It's very complicated. It's a little predestined. My master once said that the greatest respect for an idol is to challenge him and defeat him. Lu Qing answered with some consideration. Then besides the Dragon King, who else is a martial artist that you used to admire? Shu Rui asked curiously. Lu Qing didn't hide. The late bloomer Liang Yifan. At that time I wanted to be a late bloomer like him. It's a pity that you're a young hero. Shu Rui joked. She thought for a while and said, Liang Yifan once said that it was a pity that he didn't see you when you just started practicing martial arts at Songqing University. Lu Qing chuckled and said, Actually he saw me. Huh? Really? Shu Rui's eyes widened. Lu Qing smiled and said, When he came to Songqing University, I was in charge of the security at the main entrance of the hotel. Actually, you can't call it security. Later, I even asked him for an autograph. But at that time I was very inconspicuous. He probably doesn't remember. Liang Yifan, who was at home playing with his children and listening to the live broadcast, suddenly looked up in surprise. Shu Rui was even more excited. It sounds like a legend. The little security guard at that time could only stay up all night to look up to the other security guard. In the end, he rose to the same level as the other security guard and even defeated him. The internet also started a heated discussion. Everyone was quite excited. Who hadn't fantasized about something similar? After talking about Liang Yifan, Shu Rui took a deep breath and tried to find another topic to calm down. Lu Qing, no, Your Excellency Warrior Sage, when I was doing the program, entering the physical invulnerability stage, I noticed that you are more interested in the internet. Do you visit your own fan forum? Yes, Lu Qing said concisely. Shu Rui smiled and asked again, as a member of Longhu Club, do former fans visit the fan forums of Longhu Club and Dragon King? Yes. Lu Qing didn't hide it. On the forum, Wonton Seller said, clenching fist high five expression. Like I said, they will come to watch often. Oh no. I once slandered him. Will I be punched to death? Someone said half-jokingly. I'm afraid I'll be cremated. While everyone was discussing, Shu Rui asked, Then do you have an account? What's your nickname? Can you tell us? Lu Qing chuckled and replied, Schrodinger's tiger. What? In the forum, the girl Wonton Seller exclaimed in shock. Ha! What the hell? Words of shock and astonishment popped up one after another. After the interview, Lu Qing got into his SUV and returned to his villa by Xiaopei Lake. He scanned his fingerprint and opened the door. As soon as he stepped in, he heard Yanjika ask, "Cheng, what do you think of this outfit? I plan to wear it at the wedding." Lu Cheng looked up and saw that his wife was wearing an elegant Han Dynasty costume with a black base and red edges. Under the bright light, she was so beautiful that she looked like someone who walked out of a painting. Suddenly, he felt like he was back in his first year of university, looking at his wife in a red and white Han Dynasty costume in the distance from the martial arts arena. The corners of Lu Cheng's mouth curved upwards. Very. During the Lantern Festival last year, the lights in the flower market were bright as day. End of book. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.